Thank you very much. Now I call the meeting to order. I now invite the committee secretary, Ms. Zulu, to present the credentials of delegates and confirm the quorum of the meeting.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. We have the honorable member for Angola, Honorable Maria Docamo do Nascimento, present. Honorable Talita Monakotla, present. Honorable Pete Spitz, the chairperson himself, present. Honorable Marie-Jean Dakmasi, present. Honorable Loni Chijere Piri, present. Honorable Regina Esperon, not available at the moment. The Parliament of Namibia is not available. Honorable Nkesani Kate Bilankulu, South Africa, present. Senator Busisiwe Dlamini Eswatini, present. Honorable Lolesia Bukwimba Masele, Tanzania, not available at the moment. Honorable Ponde Mecha, Zambia, present. And Honorable Goodlucky Kwaramba, Zimbabwe, present. Honorable Chairperson, kindly note that the quorum is duly formed.
Okay. Agenda for the meeting was circulated to amend the draft agenda. Hello. The draft agenda has been circulated. Honorable members, the draft agenda for the meeting was circulated to all members. Are there any proposals to amend the draft agenda? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, boy, we can hear you.
Okay, Ms. Zulu. Now I've just posed a question to you. Are there any proposals to amend the draft agenda? If there are no questions, if there are no proposals to amend the draft agenda, can we now please move on? Who moved the adoption of the agenda? Can I have someone who moved the adoption of the agenda, please?
I move for the adoption of the agenda.
Seconded.
Honorable member, accordingly adopted. Agenda is accordingly adopted. Now consider the minute a correct record item by item. Welcome to Monk. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, welcome to Monk. Yeah.
Honorable members of the SADC PF Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development. The Secretary General of the SADC PF, Ms. Buemo Sokhema, the Committee Secretary, Ms. Betty Zulu, our distinguished resource persons, Dr. Nyarazai Gumbogunda, Africa Union Goodwill Ambassador for Ending Child Marriage, Mr. Lazarus Mwale, Regional Program Manager on Ending Child Marriage in Middle East, Eastern and Southern Africa. Miss Anandida Filipposi, Youth and Gender Specialist, United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, East and South Africa Region Office. Ms. Bueta Katarima Muhia, Head of Engagement, Girls Not Brides, our partners, GIZ and Austrian Development Agency, representatives of civil society organizations, representative of the media organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and privilege to welcome you to this very important thing on strengthening Parliament. I wish to extend my profound appreciation to the SADC Parliamentary Forum for making this meeting possible. As honorable members are aware, COVID-19 has prompted a global shift in meetings and events to a more visual implementation. My hope is that SADC PF will not only embrace these changes during this unprecedentedly uncertain times, but that the forum will continue to create such platform for its members to engage and empower themselves by connecting both locally and globally. Honorable members and partners, child marriage is a serious human rights violence affecting children, in particular girls' rights to health, education, equality, non-discrimination, and the right to life free from violence and exploitation. It is a practice that is rooted in gender equality, poverty, a tradition, insecurity, especially in times of conflict, limited education, and lack of adequate legal framework. COVID-19 has greatly exacerbated these drives of early and child marriage and impact negatively on the measures that have been put in place to end the practice. Lockdown, curfews, movements, restrictions on cross movement and school closure have had unintended consequences on men, women, boys, and girls, and exacerbated the already existing gendered inequalities. Many families have been pushed into deep poverty, which has in turn pushed them to consider marrying off their daughters to relieve themselves of financial burdens. As honorable members are aware, the Southern African Development Community, SADC, is not of the is one of the regions worst hit by early child marriage, with Malawi and Mozambique being among 10 countries in the world with the highest rate of child marriage. In this region, when a crisis strikes, child marriage increases exponentially. On a global scale, around 12 million girls are married per year, 2 million before their 15th birthday. A further 2.5 million girls are at risk of marriage by 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and further 1 million at risk of becoming pregnant this year alone. These numbers call for concerted effort in the fight against child marriage at regional, continental, and global level. Honorable members and partners, we are mindful that in June 2016, the SADC Parliamentary Forum adopted the SADC model law on eradicating child marriage and protecting children already in marriage, which is based on international and regional human rights instruments and standards. The modern law, human rights instruments, and the modern law provides guidance to parliamentarians policymakers, key ministries such as justice, health, social protection, education, and labor, and member states as they develop effective national laws to end child marriage and address inconsistencies in their current legal framework. The model law highlights what a comprehensive legal framework for addressing child marriage involves and reaffirms the range of rights affected by child marriage. There is no doubt that the advance of COVID-19 has reversed some of this hard-won progress made in eradicating child marriage. Pandemic-related school closure have significantly contributed to the practice of early and child marriage, particularly in Southern Africa. Honorable members, you will agree with me that as parliamentarians, we have a pivotal role to play in eradicating child marriage in our countries. As a leadership, as a leadership uniquely positioned to establish and implement a robust legal policy framework for preventing child marriage and supporting married girls. We can also ensure that the framework is effectively enforced by relevant actors and institutions. Honorable members and partners, parliaments can work to ensure that the legal and policy framework related to child marriage is accompanied by proper training of the judiciary, police and child protection officials, and any other actors responsible for the implementation and enforcement of the law, to ensure that complaints filed by girls who are at risk of child marriage or have been married underage are taken seriously by local officials, and that necessary local action is taken. Parliamentarians can set the political agenda as opinion leaders on ending child marriage by working closely with traditional leaders, pass budgets, monitor implementation, and ensure accountability for both national and international commitment on eradicating child marriage. Parliaments can guarantee that the voice of the citizens are heard, particularly the girl child, in order to mobilize political will and commitment to end child marriage. Honorable members and partners, it is my sincere hope that this meeting by the SADC PF Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Empowerment and Youth Development will result in the development of a regional plan of action to address child marriage, whether that is by developing a new targeted strategy or by integrating child marriage prevention and response measures across different sectors of SADC member states. I thank you. Honorable members, we shall now consider the minutes or to confirm, honorable members, we shall now consider the minutes to confirm if they are a correct record of the minutes of the meeting. We shall consider the minutes item by item to accommodate any differences in pagination across the language.
May we share the minutes on the screen?
I'm giving the members a chance to check the minutes. And then after, I will invite someone who will move the adoption of the minutes. I'm giving the members a chance to check the minutes. And thereafter, I will invite someone to propose adoption. The consideration and adoption of the minutes from the virtual meeting held on the 9th March 2020. I would like to invite the members to make corrections, if any. I would now like to invite the
Honorable Pete, if I may,
yes.
It may help to get section by section, request members to make any corrections or input. Thereafter, adopt the record, then move on to matters arising.
Okay.
We can start with the credentials and move on to the next section accordingly, Chair. In that manner, it would facilitate input from the members.
Okay. Now, are you saying we should go item by item?
If you allow,
we should
Chair.
go item by item.
Yes, Chair. If you
Correcting
allow,
the
that would
minutes.
be much more.
Ms. Zulu, can
Yes,
you please put them on the screen? Can you please put the minutes on the screen so we can go item by item?
The minutes are on the screen, Chair.
Now we go item by item. The first item is, according to the minutes on my screen, is the let's come from those who were present. Is it correct? Those who were present on that day? Okay, now I move on.
You control like you run but Mutlumpe Huka Bua or agenda, any comments under credentials, remove a fellow yellow, any corrections or additions. So they are waiting for that instruction from Mutlumpe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now I want to invite members to make corrections. Are there any corrections? I don't hear anyone. Now, who moves? I will now can we adopt the minutes? Can we now adopt? I want to call for someone who will, Ms. Boyamo. CG. Can you please intervene? I'm not aware if we are still on, all of us. Are we still together? I was trying to call the members to make corrections. I hear no response. I'm trying to invite someone to move the adoption. I hear no response. Can you please intervene? Help me.
And that, honorable members, we kindly switch on our cameras. The Zoom I know that it will affect the sound, but for the benefit of the chairperson and for interaction, maybe it may help for that engagement, or we may also respond accordingly as the chairperson prompts for intervention. If that is an order, honorable chair, honorable members, that would assist us to move.
I propose the adoption of the minutes.
Honorable Goodluck Koramba has proposed the adoption of the minutes. Thank you, Honorable
Welcome.
Koramba. May we kindly have a
Can I-
seconder?
A seconder, please.
Zambia seconds.
Honorable Pondemesha has seconded accordingly, Chair. Thank you.
The minutes are duly adopted. Honorable members and partners, are there any matters arising from the minutes? We shall consider matters arising item by item. Maybe now I should proceed to the next item.
Yes, Chair. Does the Chair have his procedural notes?
Yes, I have procedural notes.
Yes, Chair. If we could kindly follow in that order, it would be helpful.
Now we start with session 1, trends in early child marriage during and post-COVID-19, framework for eradication child marriage. Honorable members and partners, we are now starting our first session. We have 3 resource persons for this session. The first presenter is Dr. Nyaradai Gumbovanda, AU Goodwill Ambassador for Ending Child Marriage. She will present on the trends on child marriage and AU common position on ending child marriage based on the SADC model and AU common position on ending child. The second presenter is Miss Ivete Katarima Muhia, Head of Engagement, Girls Not Brides. She will make her presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on education and child marriage and how to mitigate the challenges presented by the pandemic on girls' education. The third and last presenter will be for the session is Miss Anandita Philippos, a youth and gender specialist, United Nations Populations Fund, UNFPA East and South Africa Region Office. She will be presenting on Parliament's mandate in eradicating early and child marriage, regional framework on eradicating child marriage, unpacking the SADC model law on eradicating child marriage and protecting children already in marriages. I shall now invite Dr. Nyaradai Kumbonzavanda, Miss Muhai, and Miss Philippos to make their presentations. I will give them 30 minutes each, followed by plenary deliberations. Resource persons to make their presentations.
Thank you, Chair, Honorable Chair, and the honorable members present, the Secretary General for the SADC Parliamentary Forum, colleagues and friends. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your deliberations today in my capacity as the African Union Goodwill Ambassador on ending child marriage. Internet is very weak, and I just need a confirmation that you can hear me, and it may break in between. Chair, can I have confirmation you can hear me?
Now I hear you very well, madam. I can hear you very well.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. First is to continue to congratulate the SADC Parliamentary Forum for your leadership in the SADC region, for your leadership on advancing gender equality and promoting and the protection of the rights of children. It is very important that we continue to recognize that it is within SADC that we have the model law on ending child marriage, and we also had the model laws on other issues, including HIV, and the SADC Gender Barometer by the SADC Secretariat. And you continue as SADC to be trailblazing and to be precedent setting. And this is very important for our work at the continental level, looking at the regional blocks as the pillars of the African Union. In 2014, the African Union launched a campaign to end child marriage, which was to implement the African Charter on the rights and welfare of the child. At the same time, it was realized that we cannot achieve Agenda 2063 of the African Union unless and until we deal with very precise issues confronting the continent, including the issues of gender inequalities, the disempowerment of girls, the abuse and violation of rights, and child marriage was seen as a critical indicator that speaks to a range of violations of human rights, and that speaks to a range of interventions, development interventions that the continent had to take. Therefore, the launch of the African Union campaign and the subsequent adoption in 2015 of the Africa Common Position on ending child marriage was in itself a step towards implementation, towards monitoring, and also prioritization of resources on the continent to these issues. Indeed, the SADC model law and the work that you are doing as a committee is very pivotal and has been cited severally as driving the implementation of the African Union campaign. We know that it is in this region, in the SADC region, that we also have most of the countries have launched the national action plans to end child marriage. And we also have a number of countries which have worked on legislation to align the law of marriage to be 18. We know that we still need more work to go around alignment. And again, this is a very important issue. The African Union, in its work, recognizes that there are interventions that need to be taken by the executive arms of governments with regards to delivery of public service, especially on health, on education, employment and food security, and on access to justice as well as social services. At the same time, it's very important that the AU recognize the role of parliaments in ensuring that we have adequate and appropriate legislation to inform policy, to inform national laws, and to inform the standards, to set the standards that is needed and necessary. And it is looking at all the recs. It is only in SADC that we have a model law that gives the directions around legislating on a range of issues as well as providing the policy directions. The African Union framework also recognizes the role of human rights institutions in the delivery of the commitment to ending child marriage. It is in this regard that the African Union the African Union Commission on Human Rights, together with the African Union Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, did adopt a common a statement, a joint recommendation on child marriage. This was to guide the interpretation of the work on ending child marriage. So within this framework, the African Union then appointed myself as the African Union Goodwill Ambassador to support the advocacy work, to guide and support member states, and to work with civil society, and also the special rapporteur on ending child marriage, who is part of the Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. Our mandates also are complemented by other mandate holders of the African Union, including the Special Rapporteur on Rights of Women, including the Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, and last year was the appointment of the Special Envoy on Youth. So as a cluster of special mandates, we work strongly in supporting the efforts of the member states. Again, the role of civil society has been critical in the work of the African Union in driving the awareness, the advocacy work, and also pushing for legislative reform. And I'm pleased that on this platform, we have a number of key partners that we've worked with closely. We are going to hear later from our colleague at Girls Not Brides, we have Plan International, and I also want to appreciate all the partners and donors who have put resources to this work at the continental level, including IM Swedish Development Partner, the UN agencies like UNICEF and others. I now want to, with that context, we know that African countries have the highest prevalence of child marriage, and we are pleased that the efforts in Southern Africa are showing a reduction in numbers, but we also continue to be concerned with the situation in Central Africa. COVID-19 is an unprecedented challenge, an unprecedented crisis that has impacted on children and on girls in ways that we didn't anticipate. When COVID-19 was first discovered, it's major. The data was showing as if this is a condition that...
Maybe, Chair, while they are assisting to resolve the issue, we may welcome the next presenter so that we don't feel,
Okay.
we don't put her under pressure, because network is an issue in our region, Chair.
All right. That is so much understandable. Will you alert me when the first presenter is back again? You will alert me. Okay. Now
Chair,
I will invite.
Oh, she's back, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, she's back. All right.
Chair,
Yes,
I've
sister.
reconnected, and
Thank you.
since I have connectivity problems, I'll just run a summary of my presentation and then send my paper for in-depth presentation. So COVID-19 has also shown for us that connectivity is a critical issue which is affecting us in so many ways, including on child marriage and on education, and we'll come back to that. So I just want to run through in terms of what COVID-19, the implications, and what has been happening at the African Union in terms of responding to COVID-19. First is that member states took measures that we all know, including measures for lockdown measures. That meant that we had to close most of the basic operations of life and impacting education, impacting livelihoods, impacting employment. And the major risk that we saw, and which was not as visible at the early days, was the impact on the girl child and how the closure of schools resulted and is resulting in so many negative impacts, including teenage pregnancies and child marriage. I know that my colleague Yvette is going to speak on this point, so I will not dwell on that point. The African Union, through the SADC, and its other institutions started to engage strongly around the impact that COVID-19 has on communities, and the most critical discussions that have emerged relate to the issues around livelihoods and the economy. And just to share with you that some of the meetings that have been held include by the Directorate for Gender, which included the Ministers for Women Affairs. The AU campaign has issued a number of briefing notes addressing a range of issues, health, child protection, and others. We also saw the Center for Education of Women and Girls and the Commission on Education. So a whole range of the AU institutions did take up the issue of child marriage as concretely. However, what we have observed, and as AU Goodwill Ambassador in all our interventions continentally, and which links with your mandate, is first is when we had COVID-19 start to escalate and increase, our parliaments were not operating for quite some time in many of our countries. And therefore, it meant we did not have the legislative leadership in the emergency response that was needed. And that is a gap. And I'm very excited that as a committee, you have stepped up, you are offering guidance on this. The second, which we observed and which is very important, is around decisions which lie in the purview of Parliament relating to resourcing COVID-19. On resourcing COVID-19, we observed naturally so that a significant resource had to go to the health sector response. However, even within the health sector response, certain issues critical to young people and which impact on child marriage were not prioritized. We saw less services being offered around sexual and reproductive health and rights, HIV, and even when we look at maternal health, we know that the majority of people who die due to pregnancy-related causes are women between 14 and 24, which means it's within the realm of those who are experiencing child marriage. So we really feel even now that we need a stronger legislative voice that speaks to the issue of resources and prioritization of interventions that prevent child marriage, but also support girls who experience child marriage. The third area that was critical for us is that in many countries, there were social protection measures that were taken. The social protection measures were taken, these were either grants or food assistance or special support to young people. Within the social protection measures that were taken continentally, including in my country, there was not sufficient focus on how do we integrate the issues around girls at risk or young women at risk or those who experience child marriage or teen moms or child-headed households. So it's very important that within the social protection measures, because these are big envelopes that usually Parliament has a role and oversight over, it's important that the social protection measures cushion the young people and especially the girls so that they don't resort to child marriage as an option. The last issue that I want to comment on links to linking to the role of Parliament is around borrowings. As your AU Goodwill Ambassador, I also sit as an advisor to the IMF Managing Director. And part of the discussions that I feel is important, including on the continent, is that we really need to have the role of Parliament very strong when our governments are negotiating assistance. It could be loans, it could be special assistance, it could be special budgetary allocations. And in that process, to ensure that issues around girls and education, health for young people, the critical indicators in the SADC model law are also resourced. the integration of child marriage into the COVID-19 response is so critical. And as I can see my internet is also playing up already. So I just want to conclude with a couple of recommendations. As we have been working together with partners and Secretary General around the SADC model law and the work that you are doing with the Oversight Committee and yourself, and how we can together strongly support the framework that you already have and juxtapose it within the COVID-19 response. We know that the topic today is speaking of a post-COVID, but I urge you that we already have COVID now. We don't know how long it is going to be here. So our programming, your interventions, your policy work should start from the premise that it's here, and it could be here for another 2 years, 3 years. We don't know. The science is not telling us when it is going away. So we need the strong role of Parliament on ending child marriage and the repositioning of our model law and its indicators to respond within the COVID-19 framework. The work with traditional institutions becomes very important. And as the African Union, we have been working with the Council for Traditional Leaders in Africa, COTLA, and also there is a mechanism for the sub-regional body. Would also request your good offices for it could be a joint session where as parliamentarians, you have a session with the traditional leaders. Because when laws are being passed to do with child marriage or monitoring, it could be the age of consent, it could be on education, realignment, sentencing. Usually the issue that arises is, what do our traditions say? So it's very important that you have set a standard, and the Council for Traditional Leaders have said, child marriage is not our culture. We do not want people who are criminals, who want to use culture and faith to abuse our children. So coming together would be important, and as the AU Goodwill Ambassador, I would like to offer my support to your coming together so that we can strongly move around the issues of working with traditional leaders. I'm also excited that Zambia, Malawi, and now Zimbabwe are the countries on the continent that have developed bylaws on ending child marriage. So to what extent are those bylaws aligning with the SADC model law, aligning with the AU Africa Common Position? That is very exciting work that is happening for us to start to see chieftains Kachindamoto, Chief Chamuka, Chief Mangwende here in Zimbabwe, Chief Ushu and others, Chief Madzimawe. They have developed the bylaws, and bylaws are within the legislative framework. So the development of our customary law, it's a very important work that we see where as SADC, you are evolving the jurisprudence in customary law for ending child marriage. And this work, we really appreciate all the partners who have stepped up for doing that, for enabling that to happen. And lastly, still around culture, is how do we innovate and start to give stronger recognition, including through your legislative role, for some of our positive norms that existed or practices. In Zimbabwe, we had Nanga. We know we are talking so much of safe spaces. In Bayoaskana, you know, yes, there are things which were not good that used to happen there, or which might not be aligned with the times now. But the notion of safe spaces has always been African as well. So it's not an external notion, and therefore as parliamentarians, how do we together reclaim at the level of policy and at the level of the continent some of the positive, deep educational frameworks that existed and nurturing frameworks that existed. This is some of the work that I am doing, working with many partners, and we really are excited around that, that possibility. The last point is around access to justice. I am concerned that continentally, child marriage is, the more we continue to call it marriage, the more we continue to sanitize a criminal act of rape, the more the justice system does not accord the adequate attention and sentencing to such a crime. And it is the role of Parliament to really push for this issue within your work with the legislature, as the legislature, with the executive and with the judiciary. We would like, at the continental level, it's very clear that what we are calling marriage, we cannot call a 10-year-old to have gone into marriage. It's rape, sexual abuse, it's trafficking in some instances, it's child labor in some instances. And therefore, the issue of justice must accord the seriousness that is needed. The challenge that we have on the continent is that we don't have sufficient social welfare services which are resourced. Because when a child dares to report her assumed husband, who is supported by her parent, that child has nowhere to go. And when a child loses the social protection of the family, her own family, accepting that marriage, and the family to which she is married also accepting because they don't want to take responsibility, that child ends up with no protection and nowhere to go. This is where we need very strong departments of social services. We need shelters. These children need a place to go to as the mediation happens, as the issues are discussed with their families, as they go back to their homes, as they then go back to school. So with COVID-19, with the constrained resources, this is where the partnership with civil society becomes important. And this is where the engagement that is needed to work collaboratively becomes so crucial. We know on the issue of resources that there are a number of partners who are putting resources to this work. We also want those resources to go to the work with parliamentarians, to the work that you are doing, to enable us to have a strong monitoring and oversight framework, to have a strong resourcing framework, to have a strong accountability framework. Again, thank you so much, Chair. I know that I had to rush, conscious of my internet. Thank you so much, Secretary General. I'll share my full paper later. Thank you. And I really appreciate your full support to me. Coming from the SADC region as your AU Goodwill Ambassador, we also appreciate so much President Edgar Lungu, who is the AU champion, presidential champion on ending child marriage. And I also want to congratulate the President, who is the chair of the Oversight Committee on her election. It means you have political leadership also that supports your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The chair had directed that the three presenters present and then take questions after.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all honorable members and partners who are joining us for this session. My name is Yvette Kathurima Muhia. I head the Africa engagement at Girls Not Brides, and I'll be making a presentation this morning that I have shared with Ms. Zulu to be projected. If not, I can project it from my end as well. So I want to start off by echoing Dr. Nyaradzai in congratulating all honorable members for the groundbreaking framework that we have as the SADC model law that not only focuses on protecting girls at risk of child marriage, but also looks at protecting girls who are already in situations of marriage and looking for ways within which we can develop their full potential in terms of access to all services, including education, justice, health, and other social services. So if my presentation cannot be projected from that end, I'll just share my screen and take you through the impact of COVID-19 on child marriages, as we've heard from our members, and look at some of the ways within which we can mitigate the challenges that have been presented, particularly on the issue of education. So allow me, honorable members, to go off video and share my screen, and we'll start off the presentation. All right, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on child marriage and education. And I will be presenting this on behalf of Girls Not Brides, which, as I'll mention, is a global partnership to end child marriage. So the outline of my session this morning will be to touch on a brief introduction on Girls Not Brides for the members who are not familiar with the global partnership, discuss a bit about the current context of child marriage within the SADC region, and then also highlight what has been the impact of COVID-19 on child marriage and education, as we've shared and have gotten responses from our membership, and then provide recommendations to end this session. So starting off, just giving a brief background on who we are as Girls Not Brides. We are a global partnership, the only global partnership working to end child marriage. Of course, looking at the linkages between child marriage and other issues, and that confirms my presentation this morning, which will be a focus on child marriage and education. We are present in all regions with a focus on sub-Saharan Africa, where we have over 54% of our 1,400 members present. And our membership consists of partners who are working within communities, so largely civil society that is community-based. We also have members that identify themselves as youth-led, looking at the importance of youth engagement in our work and the fact that child marriage occurs to the youth, so it's important for them to be engaged. And then also looking at the opinion leaders, gatekeepers, and others that Dr. Nyaradza had mentioned, we have representatives of members who work with religious leaders. So very quickly, I'm aware that you know these statistics, but it's important for us to set the context. If we are looking at child marriage within the SADC region, we have data and statistics from UNICEF that highlight within East and Southern Africa, there have been decreases on the prevalence of child marriage. So if you're looking at a shift from 2018, where we had 35% of prevalence in child marriage before the age of 18, this has now decreased to 31%. However, as highlighted by Dr. Nyaradza, it's important to see that progress is not uniform across board. Where we have decrease and market decrease across East and Southern Africa, we are still seeing very high prevalence in West and Central Africa. And if we look at the countries in the SADC region, we note that there's high prevalence in Mozambique, where we have over half of the girls getting married before the age of 18. And this is compounded by issues such as conflict. It's compounded by the natural disasters as affected by the cyclones, and also through harmful social norms. We have high prevalence in Malawi, in Madagascar, and in DRC. And if we are looking at the numbers in terms of the burden then that child marriage has in girls in the countries, we have high rates in DRC, in Tanzania, and in Mozambique. So what has the impact of COVID-19 presented on child marriage and on education? What do we know so far? Globally, the pandemic was made notable on March 11th, 2020. And since then, we've had over 44 million people infected with the virus, and unfortunately have had over 1.17 million people dying because of the corona pandemic. Then we're also seeing that governments through their public health agencies have increased collaboration to accelerate efforts to develop standardized treatments, protocols, and vaccines. So there's been a rapid shift amongst our governments, amongst pharmaceuticals and others, to see whether or not they can develop a vaccine, because as has been mentioned previously, this is the world that we are currently living in. We are not yet post-pandemic world. The impact on our communities have been severe restrictions. Some have currently been lifted, but these have impacted on our economies at a global level, at a national level, and at the local level. And this, we predict, will have a global recession possibly after the pandemic. We are also seeing increased unemployment, which has led to increased inequality. The economic impact of the lockdown has pushed already vulnerable households and the most marginalized deeper into poverty. When we look specifically on the issue of child marriage, the impact of the lockdown has affected education It has affected access to services, including sexual reproductive health. It has affected mental health, and a number of conversations have been had at different levels on the impact of COVID on mental health and associated risks. There have been increased cases of gender-based violence and severe economic distress. This has led to impacting the lives of girls, their families, and their communities because of the extreme stress due to loss of jobs, with the caregivers now looking for alternatives to provide for their families. Therefore, child marriage has been noted to be likely to increase, as there is no source of income, and people really are looking at alternatives, as I've mentioned, like dowry, to provide income to their families. So what are some of the ways within which COVID-19 has impacted on child marriage? There's been impact on education, there's been impact on health, increase in violence against girls and women, and economic impacts. I won't go into the details of all this, but will focus largely on the education stream. The lockdowns and school closures have disrupted learning. This has had a disproportionate impact on the poor, where online learning has been advanced. And we know that this is not available and easily accessible to all. There's been limited access to this learning, online learning, for few girls. And the concern is that many girls then will not return to school once lockdowns are lifted and restrictions are lifted, because there'll be close relationships with teenage pregnancies and lack of access to services for these girls to access education, therefore limiting the numbers of girls who will return to school. Sometimes, and in some cases, the cost of education may therefore become unaffordable. And as I mentioned earlier, families will look for alternatives. And some families may prefer to educate their boys over their girls, which is devastating, and therefore calls for us to really look at the importance of social norms and gender norms within our communities. So when discussing with our members since the onset of the coronavirus, our members have flagged that it's important for us to raise the voices of and protect the girls who are increasingly at risk. And we've highlighted some examples of what our members have been able to do. They're working with social media to ensure that education material is translated into different languages. They're looking at the use of radio, where girls may not have access to computers. Girls' clubs are still being held, albeit in smaller numbers, and the importance of helplines, particularly to raise cases of gender-based violence within the communities. When we talk about online and offline learning as a method to ensure continuity for girls' education, we have opportunities to ensure increased collaboration with partners, so civil society and government, to mitigate the digital divide, especially for communities with no access to digital learning. So we are looking at examples where in Tanzania, for example, there have been groups of organizations that have gone around to the communities with past papers of exams and are working with the children within the communities to revise this where online learning is impossible. Critical to note is that civil society space is also shrinking within the context of the pandemic. We have seen, and sadly so, a risk of rollback on progress gains that have been made. We know the cases that are happening now in Cameroon. We know that governments are using this opportunity of the crisis to deny people their human rights, but we also know that there are governments who are more willing to work with civil society, recognizing the reach that they have within their communities. We also have noted that budgets for education are at risk, particularly given the competition amongst different sectors to rise up to the challenges that COVID-19 has presented. So what can we do to mitigate some of these impacts? When we're looking at child marriage and COVID-19, it's important for us to consider that we must ensure comprehensive measures to not only prevent, but also to respond to cases of child marriage. Therefore, looking at how we can increase access to education, ensure psychosocial support, particularly linking to what I've mentioned, the importance of ensuring mental health, ensuring that we have economic and SRHR services, regardless of marital status, so we do not have girls being turned away from medical facilities because they're under the age of 18. We also need to consider that during this process, which is the lockdown and what has been termed as the acute phase, and hopefully when we get to recovery phase and post-pandemic, that we advocate for girls to return to school despite their condition. So they need to be able to access school, even when they're pregnant. They need to be able to access SRHR information and services, and the schools need to be conducive in terms of their sanitation so that this does not affect girls during menstruation. We also need to ensure understanding of gender inequalities. We all come from societies and are aware of the harmful norms that have been perpetuated from generation to generation. Therefore, an analysis of gender and sex disaggregated data will help us to inform the design, implementation, and monitoring of interventions to really look at the challenges that this COVID-19 has presented on access to education, but at the same time, prevention of harmful practices such as child marriage and FGM. When we look at travel restrictions, which have been informed notably at the very beginning of the virus, but we still have countries that are observing curfews now and others that are during lockdowns, we need to ensure that we have longer term and flexible funding to support localization of responses so that our governments are also working with us to raise domestic resources for social sectors such as education and health. It's very important to ensure that girls and women are consulted. Where youth engagement is critical, we all know the saying, nothing for us without us. And we have to especially amplify the voices of young women who have been disproportionately affected by the virus. We also need to ensure learning and adaptation. And I know my colleagues will share about some of the research that we are planning, some of the research that is being undertaken currently by governments to look at some of the lessons that can be learned, the best practices that can be replicated at scale, so that this pandemic also becomes an opportunity for us to look at innovation within our African communities and societies. In terms of protecting the progress that we have already made on girls' right to education, it's important for us to leverage teachers and communities as the point of contact, the first point of contact to the girls themselves, to work with the teachers to report absences of girls when schools are opened and ensure that we have of appropriate distance learning practices. Countries such as India have gone to the sense of including the communities in back to school approaches, where they are painting homes and schools with black paint so that this can be used by the girls as their blackboards, for example. Keep financing flowing into education systems and to ensure that it benefits girls and boys equally, particularly now that we are looking at, we need to ensure that we have retention of girls in school and avoid dropout rates. We also have to consider the gender digital divide, and closely linked to that is being aware of the harassment that happens online and that we are able to safeguard the voices and the services of our girls and boys. I have mentioned the importance of engaging young people, and as we ensure a safe return to school, is to work with government, private sector, and other civil society to ensure that the PPEs are available, that there's temperature being taken, that anybody who is thought of being at risk is adequately taken care of, and that access to school is made easier. Where school physically cannot be had, we have online learning that is protected, that is made accessible to all despite class and economic disparities. And what can you do specifically as parliamentarians? Some of the recommendations that we have made is to safeguard education spending, so to ensure that we free up resources by either postponing restructuring debt for low and middle income countries, and I'm sure these are conversations that Dr. Nyarazai has been having as chair of Action Aid and also advisor through the IMF. We have to ensure that we increase efficiency, effectiveness, and innovation, that every dollar, shilling, kwacha spent is spent well on tackling waste, making sure that we really highlight the importance of our teachers, that they are paid well, and that we invest in resilience, particularly in our education systems. We need to ensure that we innovate and close the financial gap. So exploring new sources of support to education systems. I've talked about the importance of debt restructuring and conversations around this, however difficult they may seem, so that we protect human capital investment and look at ways within which we can have a comprehensive post-COVID-19 plan where different groups and sectors are working together. Here we've highlighted the importance of the Ministry of Health and Education, but we also know that there are other sectors like gender, children's services that should work together to develop and communicate well-defined timelines. We shouldn't rush to open schools for the sake of opening them, but to ensure that once our children are in schools, they are protected and the standards within which operating procedures on health and sanitation are maintained. We need to ensure that we have strong voices in building public awareness. So the key role of parliamentarians in making sure that you are acting as key champions on ending child marriage, looking at the prevalence that we've highlighted, acknowledging the drivers and the consequences, and calling for greater government leadership and investment in child marriage prevention and mitigation, particularly in light of COVID-19, increased cases of conflict, and the impact of natural disasters on our girls. We are also looking at you leading the gender-sensitive approaches in education response and ensuring that governments support continued learning by investing in inclusive, gender-responsive distance education methods, and I have provided examples of such. Looking at ensuring that re-entry policies are in play and are implemented so that when schools reopen, pregnant girls, married girls, young mothers are fully supported to return. Ensuring that we involve girls and women in the response to all our education needs and COVID-19 pandemic mitigation. And most importantly, advocate and make monies available for counseling support, helplines, and girls' clubs, because there will be a need for these conversations to be held. There will be a need for psychosocial support to be provided, so that where there have been cases of child marriage and other forms of abuse, these are directly taken to court for prosecution, where the girl can have access to justice. And I wanted to share some resources that could inform your work going forward. Girls Not Brides has published a brief on child early and forced marriage and the impact of COVID-19. The AU has done remarkable work in looking at the impact of coronavirus, not only on gender equality and women's empowerment, but also on Africa's economy. And other players such as DFID and Knowledge for Development have published works on what the secondary impacts of COVID will have, not only on girls and women, but particularly on violence against women and girls. And I also wanted to make special reference on the work that has been done by our partner, Plan International, on the impact of COVID-19 in humanitarian settings, because we are looking at settings that have already or are already currently facing crises, humanitarian disasters, and are now have to deal with COVID-19. So these are some of the resources that you can review following this session. And to conclude, I'd like to thank you and to end with a quote by Kofi Annan that says, "To educate girls is to reduce poverty." Thank you once again for inviting Girls Not Brides to this session. Thank you for hosting such groundbreaking work on the SADC model law to eradicate child marriage and to protect children already in marriage. And thank you also for looking at ways within which, even in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, parliamentarians can utilize all their authority to hold governments accountable and work with partners such as civil society to ensure that at the end of the day, girl-centered programming is working to end child marriage and ensure that the girls have access to all their rights and live lives to the best of their ability. Thank you once again, and I hand over back to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Yvette. We now call upon the next presenter, being Miss Anandita.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anandita Philippos with the UNFPA regional office based in Johannesburg and covering 23 countries in the region. Thank you very much for inviting UNFPA to present to the honorable members on the SADC model law, and also to thank the partners that have gone before me who have set the scene quite clearly about the importance and urgency to address the issue of child marriage that continues to worsen in our current COVID-19 context. I also wanted to share an additional resource to those that Yvette shared. These are projections given by UNFPA on the impact of COVID-19 on child marriage, female genital mutilation, teenage pregnancy, and contraceptive use. I'll put it in the chat box if that's okay for everyone to take a look at, because I think it'll give an interesting overview of what lockdown means in terms of projections globally on child marriage, FGM, and other issues. With that, I will share my screen. Please do let me know when you're able to see the presentation.
Yeah, it is on the screen.
Oh, thank you so much for the acknowledgement. So today I will be presenting on the SADC model law on eradicating child marriage and protecting children already in marriages. But I want to acknowledge the fact that I am with partners and with honorable members who are themselves experts in crafting this law as well as using this law. So I would like to also invite you when I finish to share your experiences in the development of the law and the implementation of the SADC model law in your country context as well, because I think that leads to a richer discussion as well. So to start with, and this will repeat a little bit of what Yvette and Dr. Narizad may have already said, but I think it's important to again reset the context in our region. While Yvette has pointed out we have seen some positive changes, the reality is still 1 in 3, almost 1 in 3 girls aged 20 to 24 in our region is married before their 18th birthday. However, what this does is masks the huge disparities between and within countries. For example, in Mozambique, nearly 1 in 2 girls are married before their 18th birthday, while in the Nampula province, more than 3 in 5 girls, I just want to repeat that, are married before the age of 18, and nearly 1 in 5 below the age of 15, which is a very, very young child marriage, which is of concern for us as well. Now, while the overall percentages of child marriage have been decreasing in many countries across the region in the last decade, especially before the age of 15, which is good news. The bad news is that while population growth has continued, and what that means is that there's a larger number of girls that will continue to get married into the future. And so this continues to be a huge concern for us. And then finally, I want to set the scene a little bit about the overall context that adolescent girls live in. Adolescent girls face multiple challenges. This includes child marriage. It includes high levels of teenage pregnancies, many of which are in the context of child marriage. It includes high levels of violence, including sexual violence, sometimes in the context of a child marriage. And there's also particularly vulnerable to HIV transmission. And all of these factors have been exacerbated in the COVID-19 context, as has been very eloquently pointed out by Yvette in the previous presentation. And so it's something that deserves our attention, but it's also important for us to situate the overall issue of child marriage within the larger context of the work we do with girls. We talk a lot about the demographic dividend, and I just wanted to pause here a little bit and tell you what that actually means in terms of looking at the adolescent girl. We often like to say, let's give a human face to the discussions we're having. Let's talk about the 10-year-old girl and what her future looks like. So let's say this is the 10-year-old girl. The dotted line that you see going downwards is when you miss the demographic dividend. That means you haven't invested in young people's health, education, and employment, especially in adolescent girls. So on this dotted orange line, you have a 10-year-old girl who may have gotten married sometime in her adolescence. She may have had to leave school either because she got married or maybe she had an early pregnancy. As we know, that is a leading cause for a lot of girls dropping out of school. She may have repeat pregnancies as an adolescent, which has impact on her health as well as the health of her children. It could mean child illness and death, as well as an increase in maternal morbidities. What this means is that you'll have someone who hasn't been able to complete her education and maybe also suffers from health issues, and therefore will never be able to get a formal job and would often be in informal settings where there's insecurity as well around the job conditions, and also a high risk of being displaced and having to move depending on economic circumstances. And that finally leads to an insecure older age and also has a multiplier negative impact on her children. And this is the missed demographic dividend. Let's take the blue line. This is where the 10-year-old girl manages to stay in school and get an education. She is able to find a job and get decent employment upon graduation because of her education credentials. She chooses when and whom to marry as an adult. And she chooses how many and the timing of her children. And so they're also healthy. She's therefore more secure with a better work-life balance and is able to engage also in lifelong learning. What this also means is that she's able to reinvest in her own children and ensure secure old age, which leads to the demographic dividend. What's important to also emphasize here is that there's an economic argument in addition to the human rights argument. Now, the human rights argument to end child marriage is predominantly the argument we need to use because it's important to look at the rights of the adolescent girl to be a girl. However, there is an economic argument that appeals to a lot of the governments we work with, which is that spending approximately 3.8 per capita per year on programs to reduce child marriage would yield a nearly 6-fold return. And we've also seen World Bank studies around the economic argument for investing in ending child marriage. Now, this brings me to the SADC model law, and many of you would know this law even better than I have. You would have been involved in the development of this law as well as the rollout of the law in your countries. I'll take you through the different facets of the law and then a case study at the end. So the SADC Parliamentary Forum led the development of the SADC model law on child marriage. The full title is the Model Law on Eradicating Child Marriage and Protecting Children Already in Marriage. This was done in collaboration with partners, and SADC PF was the natural lead for it because of the role it mandated to lead the region through interparliamentary cooperation between 14 SADC member parliaments. The forum, with the support of UNFPA through the UNFPA UNICEF Global Program that I manage in the region, Girls Not Brides Network that Yvette spoke to, and Plan International that will be speaking later on today, developed the model law through an extensive consultative process with members of parliament, civil society organizations, and other collaborating partners. So it provides a framework for action, and it's linked very closely to the UNFPA UNICEF Global Program on Child Marriage Global Theory of Change. So what is this global theory of change, or what is the results framework we work with? One is that our interventions are truly girl-centered. We empower adolescent girls at risk of and affected by child marriage, and these adolescent girls often are our most powerful advocates and mentors in ending child marriage themselves. We also realize that girls don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in context with families and communities that influence their lives and influence their choices. So we work with families and communities to promote positive behaviors towards girls and their rights. We also work to ensure that girls get the services that they need and the systems are prepared to provide those services. And this is to ensure that health, education, protection, and other systems are responsive to the needs and demands of girls. We also work with governments in creating a positive legal and policy environment in relation to child marriage. And this is where the SADC model law on child marriage sits, but it also influences all the other areas of work I've just outlined. And the last is to use and build the data and evidence on what works to end child marriage and harmful practices. So what are the rationale and objectives of the model law? The objective of the model law to serve as a yardstick and an advocacy tool for legislators in the SADC region. It provides best practice language without loopholes that can be used, adapted, and adopted by member states in their own laws dealing with the eradication of child marriage or protecting girls already in marriage. The model law can assist policymakers and legislative drafters to address all relevant areas in the need of legislative reform without usurping the authority of national legislators to determine the content, extent, style, and form of their national laws. So it's really a guiding tool and an advocacy tool that can be very powerful in helping to set progressive legislation to end child marriage. Now, who can use the SADC model law? And here this is important because actually people think, oh, it's just for legislators, but actually it can be used by a number of different stakeholders. It's meant for policymakers who are developing policies and strategies relating to the eradication of child marriage and protecting girls in marriage. It can be used by legislative drafters when drafting national laws. It can be used by lawmakers when enacting legislation on the eradication of child marriage or protecting girls in marriage. It can be used by judicial officers when interpreting the laws, and researchers who are doing research on child marriage. And then finally, it can be used by administrators when applying and implementing the laws related to the eradication of child marriage and protecting girls already in marriage. So there are different parts of the model law, and it's very clearly stated in both the model law as well as the guide to using the model law, which are two complementary documents we often refer to when we're looking at how the model law is applied. The model law addresses 5 main thematic areas. These are the preamble, Part 1, preliminary provisions, Part 2, restatement of rights and concepts relating to the child, policies, measures, and interventions, Part 3, which is on the prohibition of betrothal and child marriage and supportive provisions, Part 4, measures and interventions to prevent child marriage, Part 5, which is measures and interventions to mitigate the effects of child marriage, Part 6, which is access to data and information, public awareness, and monitoring and evaluation, and Part 7, which is the general provisions, offenses, and enforcement. I'll take you through some of the main key parts through each of these in the rest of my presentation. I do want to say that these were all developed based on the best available evidence and guidance and research on child marriage and child betrothal and the best practices that are in place to end child marriage and protect girls who are already in marriage. This is from literature and documents prepared by UN bodies, academics, civil society organizations, and other key partners and renowned experts on this area. The main salient features of the model law are as follows. The model law enshrines standards from different international human rights instruments and gives SADC member states a legal document that they can adapt for incorporation in domestic legislation. While the focus is on child marriage, given the holistic approach we often take to child marriage, as I outlined at the beginning of my presentation, the SADC model law also contains provisions for the elimination of harmful social and cultural practices that impact the welfare, dignity, and development of the child. Part 1 and 2, which is the preliminary provisions and restatements. Part 1 of the model law is the definition of the interpretation section. Part 2 is the restatement of the rights and concepts relating to the child. This includes concepts like the best interest of the child, protection from discrimination, equality before the law, right to life, right to privacy, dignity and respect, right to the protection from exploitation and abuse, and protection from harmful practices, the right to education, the right to health, and protection from child labor, among many others. And this is important because there's actually an entire universe of human rights that are interlinked with ending child marriage. Part 3 really looks at prohibition of betrothals and child marriage. It contains the fundamental provisions of the model law, which is the prohibition of a child marriage, prohibition of betrothal of a child, as well as prohibition of the third party involvement to a child marriage. A contravention of these preventions would constitute an offense. And if the offender is a person on whom the child depends, such as a parental or guardian relationship, it will be considered an aggravating circumstance. Part 3 also provides that for marriages contracted before coming into the operation of the law, they are avoidable at the option of either party. So this is to also protect girls who are already in marriage who are looking for a way out of that child marriage. There's a provision on equal distribution of property acquired during the marriage between partners of a child marriage after the latter is declared void. And this will apply unless the property has been inherited. This is also to ensure that the girl who leaves a child marriage has economic protection in addition to the other forms of protection she should receive. Part 4 is measures and interventions to prevent child marriage. And this places an obligation on the relevant minister to put in place measures and interventions in consultation with the appropriate authorities. There needs to be a budget available also for this work. It can be called an anti-child marriage fund, or it can be any other kind of fund, but it needs to be provided by the government directly for such a purpose. Provision also needs to be made for a restraining order by the court to prevent a child marriage if that's what it's needed. And this order can be made on the application of a child marriage prohibition officer, appropriate authority, or any person having personal information of the circumstances. There's also an obligation of the government to establish multi-sectorial programs and incentives to delay marriage. And this, I just want to re-emphasize this point as well. The UNFPA UNICEF Global Program on Child Marriage is a multi-sectorial program, and we work with governments to make sure that it sits within different ministries that are contributing to education, health, judicial work, social development, gender, etc., because that's the only way we'll actually respond to the needs of girls in child marriages or at risk of child marriage. Part 5 is around the measures and interventions to mitigate the effects of child marriage and protect children already in marriage. These could include the setting up of public safety homes and other public facilities for the residence, care, and maintenance of victims of child marriage, strengthening community networks, and that includes traditional leaders and religious authorities that play such a key role in so many countries in our region, as well as the training of officials to prevent and enforce child marriage law. Part 6 and 7 is the access to data and enforcement. And this is absolutely critical because we need the data to actually know whether whether the interventions are working, whether girls are being protected from child marriage, and whether they're able to use the law to protect themselves. So this provides for data collection, monitoring and evaluation, and public awareness to be conducted by the ministry. There's also an obligation of the government to provide child marriage education or education and communication on the impact of child marriage as a healthcare service by all healthcare providers, both public and private. Part 7 provides for general provisions. It provides for state reports to be sent to the SADC-PF on measures taken by the state towards eradicating child marriage and the protection of children already in marriage. And this is a key part because it also plays into the accountability role, which is so important in the enforcement and implementation of the SADC model law. So the use of the SADC model law, now the development of the SADC model law on child marriage was a long consultative process, but it's not an end in itself, but rather it marked the beginning for national parliaments, CSOs, youth and other intended users of the model law for policy and program design. And I'll speak a little bit about a case study on how a country's actually used this law. Having said that, there needs to be continuous efforts to guide advocacy for sustained ownership, capacity building, and technical assistance to member states for the implementation of this model law, as well as for coordination, financing, and strengthening mechanisms for accountability for results. As I mentioned, I wanted to share a case study, and I know several other countries that are on the call today have also used the model law. And as I said at the beginning, I would be very interested in hearing from your experiences how this has worked in reality. This is the Mozambique example that I'm going to share now. The government of Mozambique, with strong support from UN agencies, civil society, and donor, decided to review the national family law. So the national family law had a loophole that allowed for marriages below the age of 18, between 16 and 18, with parental consent. And so they went through a process of reviewing this national family law to set the minimum age of marriage at 18 with no exceptions. A task force was established in August 27 to draft a separate law on child marriage and using the SADC model law as a reference. So it played a really key role in helping set that domestic legislation. The draft law provided integrated protection for children against premature marriages or child marriages with civil, criminal, and procedural aspects. It criminalized informal unions that were child marriages or child unions and created sanctions and accountability for associated acts. And it looked at both the eradication of child marriages, or as they call it in Mozambique, premature marriages, and the protection of children that are already in a child marriage or a child union. The draft law was approved by Parliament in July 2019 as the Prevention and Combat of Premature Unions Act. So you see here quite clearly how the SADC model law helped set in place new legislation that was truly comprehensive and responded to the different facets of child marriage, both in terms of preventing and mitigating its impact. I'd like to end by some reflections on the way forward. One is that we want to continue to strengthen the knowledge and the utilization of the model law, and the role of honorable members of parliament here is absolutely critical in doing so. Encouraging South-South sharing of experiences between countries is also very important because it allows you to think through how another country has used the SADC model law in a practical way and whether that can be useful for your country context as well as to do joint advocacy where relevant. There needs to be increasing awareness of rights holders, many of them young girls themselves. And what that means is that we need to take this very comprehensive and technical document and translate it into easy to understand knowledge products for a wide range of users. And UNFPA is actually currently embarking on a process to develop a set of animated videos on the SADC model law. And this is being done in partnership with the SADC PF, with Girls Not Brides, and with UNICEF, to really look at how can we break down the model law in a way that is visually appealing and attractive and easy to understand for a wide audience. So that process is ongoing. While the model law has been in place for a number of years, it still requires continuous capacity building as well as following up with parliamentarians, CSOs, and youth to ensure its use, as well as to ensure the monitoring and accountability aspects. All stakeholders, and that includes members of parliament, it includes civil society, it includes government and UN agencies, etc., need to collaborate for accountability on child marriage to really take shape. And then finally, I just want to acknowledge the huge impact the SADC model law has had on other aspects of work and other areas. For example, it's been guiding work on a complementary model law on gender-based violence that also looks at some of the violence aspects that some of the girls that we work with face. And so it set the tone for the development of future model laws like this. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I want to thank you all again very much for extending the invitation to the United Nations Population Fund to speak about the SADC model law and our key partnership and collaboration in making this law a reality for everyone. Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our resource persons, for such informative presentation. I shall now open the floor for the debate. Can you hear me?
Yes, Chair.
Since I can't see your pictures on the screen, will you please, Secretariat, help me to choose those who raise up their hands, because my screen doesn't show me the hands. If you may.
No, noted, Chair.
Hello, Zulu.
Hello, Chair.
Ms. Zulu.
Hello, Chairperson.
Are we together?
Can you hear me? Yes, we are, Chair.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. Honorable members, kindly be guided that if you would like to raise your hand, I'm sorry I didn't say this earlier, but at the bottom of the screen here, at the menu, at the bar just below the screen here, you're able to raise your hand if you wish to speak, and then I will be able to. Honorable Chair, we have Honorable Kwaramba, Zimbabwe. He wishes to speak.
Honorable Koramba, please take the floor.
Hello, Chair, can you hear me?
Koramba?
Yes, good morning.
Yes.
Mine is a brief
Good morning.
observation. Morning. Can I go on?
Morning, Honorable. Morning, Honorable.
Can I proceed?
Good morning, Honorable.
Good morning.
Yes, Honorable. Carry on. Morning,
Yes.
carry on.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much. Mine is a brief observation.
Yeah.
I am encouraged by the observations by the presenter, Mrs. Gumbonzanda. My small contribution is that the presenter rightly identified that we are abusing the word marriage by saying child marriages. They are not marriages. Sure, it is rape. We should find ways of describing it as it is. It is high time we call a spade a spade. It cannot be called by any other name. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Koramba. Next one, please.
Chair, we have the Honorable Member for Botswana.
Honorable Member for Botswana, take the floor, please. Take the floor, Honorable Member from Botswana.
Chairperson, I think the Honorable Member is on mute.
Honorable Member, maybe you should press unmute on your screen so that we can be able to hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Now we can hear you very well.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chair, SG, honorable members, good day, and thank you for giving me the chance to comment on this. All the presenters were very good. Congratulations and thank you for this. And thank you for this for the information. Mine is just a comment because I'm a member of parliament from the rural areas. But there was one presenter who was talking about digital learning, which is very, very good. During our lockdown in Botswana, what our president did, there was a digital learning through radio and the TV, especially with the TV. But unfortunately, with the rural areas, there was no digital learning. There was because we don't have the radio or the network or the signal. I can see that. But unfortunately, my girls, lots of girls, unfortunately, got pregnant. But I can see that the lady who was presenting this exactly what happened to that rural areas could have been prevented through digital learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Munna Khota. Thank you very much. May I please invite another person to participate? Do we have another person? Do we have a next person? Ms. Zulu.
Honorable Chair, thank you.
Yes.
Currently, I cannot see any honorable members indicating, but maybe the presenters could comment on the two interventions by the honorable member for Botswana and the honorable member for Zimbabwe.
Okay. Our presenters, can you have anything to say on the inputs that we just had? Can you say something on what we just had from the honorables who have just said something?
Thank you, Chair. I want to reflect on the power of parliamentarians, on the power of parliaments or parliamentarians around interpretation and language. I think since we have the SADC model law, it could lie within your committee, following on the comment from Honorable Kwaramba, where you could offer a range of language in addition to building on what is already in the SADC model law, and say as a committee, as you move forward, the proposed language that you would like to continue, that you would propose is as follows. And I can see we also have our colleagues we have presented from UNFP and others who are into knowledge management can support in terms of what are the implications of using some proposals or the other. But I fully welcome the recommendation from Zimbabwe, from Honorable Kwaramba, around thinking of juvenile rape or child rape, or for us to really deconstruct this crime and give it an appropriate naming for what it is. For the honorable member from Botswana, I am sitting in Shamba district where I live, which is almost more than 100 kilometers out of Harare, in a rural area. Definitely the issue of access and digital is critical. This could be the time when parliamentarians and as a committee could look into also your budget. You have budget oversight and do budget monitoring. We know the executive might be approaching different parliaments to appropriate new resources to respond to COVID-19 in the area of education. You could have an action point or an advice around increasing investment on technology, connectivity, and energy options in rural areas linked with COVID-19. It's a very doable, practical intervention that parliaments can take in the advocacy, but also as part of your action, your call to action or your decisions coming out of this meeting is increased investment on technology, connectivity, and energy resources in rural areas in order to mitigate the plight of children, but especially the girl child. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Nyarathai. Can we have another presenter if you want to have a chance?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to make a response to Honorable Munakotla, particularly in reference to the fact that COVID-19 indeed has presented increased inequalities, not just for those in the rural area, but also amongst the urban poor. and looking at building on what Dr. Nyaradzai has said, the importance of ensuring cross-sectoral interventions so that the Committee of Gender is also working with the Committee of Health, a Committee on Economic Justice, that look at violence against women and girls in totality and not as isolation, so that factors affecting girls' access to contraceptives and to other services could be affected through a holistic package, and looking particularly in contexts that have been affected not only by COVID, but had previously also been affected by other humanitarian disasters. And then in response to Honorable Kwaramba is clearly to say, as a secretariat, we have been interrogating these issues on language, and Dr. Nyaradzai will attest to this, looking at the language that is passed on at the global level that has been agreed to as child early forced marriage and informal unions, because we also have to consider peer-to-peer marriages amongst adolescents as informal unions that attribute to the increased prevalence rates. So this is something as a secretariat that we are continuously interrogating and is clearly even current in the development sector, and the use of language to move from cases of child marriage to rape, particularly when we are seeing in the justice sector, most cases of child marriage are actually prosecuted as defilement. So it's important for us to have continued conversations around this, and we as Girls Not Brides will be part of the processes, and are looking forward to work together with the AU Commission, Dr. Nyaradzai's office as Goodwill Ambassador, as well as the SADC PF to explore this further. Thank you very much to the honorable members who intervened, and also thank you very much, Chair. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Yvette. Now, if Ms. Anadida can say something, is your chance, madam?
Thank you so much.
If you want to say something.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to pick up on something that Yvette mentioned about the continuity of services. So one of the things we've seen in the lockdown context is that services such as sexual and reproductive health services and gender-based services have been disrupted because of lockdown measures. Either the services themselves have stopped, or the healthcare providers have been sort of overwhelmed with the COVID-19 response, or women and girls are either scared to go into clinics or do not have a safe means to access these services. And this has had huge impacts on the work that we do with women and girls to really safeguard their lives and to make sure that they have the access to the services they need. One of the key things we've been doing is advocating with governments to say that these are life-saving essential services that need to continue in the context of COVID-19. And this is something that is really important to emphasize as part of the multi-sectoral response to child marriage as well. And linked to that, we've also seen increasing anecdotal evidence about a rise in teenage pregnancies, which is also a huge concern for us, and linked to the fact that these services, including contraceptive services, etc., are often not available in our current lockdown context. And this is very important, and it's a key role for parliamentarians also to play to ensure these services is continue to go on. The other thing I wanted to say is that we have seen an alarming rise in gender-based violence. We've already had extremely high levels of gender-based violence in our region prior to the pandemic, and we've seen a huge spike already in the months of lockdown we have had. And that's often because women and girls are stuck in a closed space with their perpetrators in many contexts. And some of this violence might be happening in the context of a child marriage as well. And so it's very important, again, to look at gender-based violence within the context of the work we're doing on child marriage, to ensure that they're life-saving gender-based violence services that continue to be provided through the health, police, justice, and social services, and that we continue to focus on advocating with governments to ensure that these services, both gender-based violence and sexual and reproductive health services, continue undisrupted in the lockdown context and continue to be child and adolescent friendly. Thank you very much. Back to you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Anandida. Thank you very much, Anandida. we still have about 30 minutes or 40 minutes or so. So I would like to invite more hands if we have more input from other members. We still have about 30 minutes or so before we break for lunch. Do we still have more hands? Do we still have more members who wants to make their inputs? Is there any hand, Zulu?
Okay, with your indulgence, can I just reflect on one point?
Okay, okay. It's Dr. Nyarandai. Dr. Nyarandai, take the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you. In the last 6 years that I've served as the AU Goodwill Ambassador and also my work in my community in Zimbabwe, we have a very strong work focusing on the girl child herself. I think it would be important to look at perpetrator profile. We know that the work that UNFPA and other organizations working with adolescents has also shown is that children are having sex among themselves and at times end up with these unions or marriages. But beyond that, the perpetrator profile is important for intervention, because I feel that as society in the region, in the continent, we are struggling with bringing perpetrators to book. Usually in the person who marries a child has more power in that village. Either they have a position or they have resources. It's always mostly associated with some power imbalance. And my work with traditional leaders, they'd also started to challenge themselves to say, even people in positions of power, it could be traditional leaders, it could be pastors in the...
Honorable Chairperson.
Ms. Zulu.
Yes, we seem to have
Dr.
a
Nyarandai.
connectivity. Yes, she's having some connectivity issues.
So what do you think? What do you think now? Can we go for lunch? Can we break for lunch now? If we don't have more hands?
Honorable members, if there are any comments or interventions by the three presentations, by the three presenters, please go to the menu bar and there's a raise hand facility there. If not, Chairperson, I think an early lunch, yes. Honorable members.
Okay, in the event that we don't have more hands, in the event that we don't have more hands, we don't have anyone who wants to say something at this juncture, this will conclude our first session. We shall now break for lunch and reconvene.
The Honorable Member for Botswana. Yes, Chair, the Honorable Member for Botswana.
Okay. Honorable Member for Botswana, take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Hello.
Hello, you are on. Please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. There was one very good presenter. Okay, all of them are good. Who said you have to be a strong public speaker or public to talk for your people, and also for people to know or to educate them about this post-COVID-19. How, especially young girls, how it can affect economy, because especially in rural areas, that's where the economy is very, very, very bad, or I can say poverty is very, very bad there. and how you can do it. I think I need I need a little bit of clarity there. How we can manage it, or how we can, how you can talk to your people in the rural area, especially with poverty. Especially with government helping very low people there and there. As a parliament, how can you really go inside, or how can you really work with the people affected with COVID-19? Because unemployment is very, very high. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable T. Munna. Thank you very much. Can we have
Honorable Chair?
Hello.
There's also
hello,
there's also Honorable Ponde Mecha. He has raised his hand, so maybe we could take those two before the presenters come in.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Chair. Hello, Chair.
Take the floor, Honorable.
Thank you so much. Are you able to get me?
I get you very well. Please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I missed most of the presentations due to connectivity problems. I'm just wondering if the Secretariat can send me the presentation so that I catch up over lunch. Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
We'll do Honorable.
Okay, Ms. Zulu. Honorable, the presentations will be sent to you through, so you can check during over lunch. So, do we still have anyone who wants to say something? If we don't, I'm going to give a floor to our presenters to answer honorable member from Botswana.
Thank you, Chair. COVID-19 has created opportunities for communities to innovate in some countries, but not in all. We have started to see people producing liquid soap, sanitizers. I feel what is important is whether rural or urban, is how do we protect innovations in communities for them to meet the standards that are required by government, but for resources to go there. Because when COVID ends, the big business will come and take away the innovations which were happening in communities. I have seen just the production of masks in many of our countries has been happening. The little machines have come out. So how do we start to protect that so that people don't go, big industry does not take away the community innovation? So that's my first response. And as Parliament, you asked specifically what is the role of Parliament is really to see what are those innovations in rural communities that needs protection by law, that needs resourcing in terms of scaling up, or that need piloting. The other area that has hit us so hard is regional trade and cross-border trading. Many people in rural areas, we also do, especially those who live around borders with each other. People trade across. And the economy has been affected because of the closure of the borders, the control of COVID-19. So Parliament has a strong role in monitoring the decisions around movement of people and what the opportunities that are there. I have not seen a study, but definitely, or some critical information, but I know on the work that I do, the issue around cross-border trading for people, for communities around our borders, in rural communities is a very important. We are one economy, and not just looking at the macro economy, but also at that level. I think it's important for Parliament, as you review the various decisions of government around opening of borders and what is prioritized, is to ensure both protection, but also to ensure that those livelihood sectors do not remain under lockdown, but with enough protection. Agriculture is important, and agriculture is important beyond subsistence. And therefore, from the African Union, there's a very strong advocacy for us to retire the whole to the museum so that we also have equipment for agriculture in rural areas. So I think those are some of the initiatives which would like Parliament to continue to push so that we don't remain in the subsistence of just digging with a hole for eating, but we are also able to produce and be part of the agribusiness value chain. And for girls and young people to know that we can actually earn a livelihood and a career through agribusiness. We understand the new millionaires are people who are in agriculture, and agriculture is rural. And so I think that reorientation, looking at parliamentarians, you connect with your constituencies, and at the same time you legislate. So the work that you do within the communities and the constituencies to reorient agriculture beyond subsistence, I think it's important, and also to push for investment to young people in agribusiness and within the value chain, including young women, so that we remove the dependence. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Doctor. Welcome, Dr. Nyarazai. We still have few minutes before we break for lunch. If we have someone who wants to contribute, we still have an opportunity to do that, which you can offer.
Thank you,
Do we
Chair.
have anyone who wants?
Thank you, Chair. I want
Hello?
to take you up on the opportunity to contribute to Honorable Munokatla.
Welcome, Yvette. Take the floor.
Thank you. So, Honorable, you've highlighted poverty very rightfully as a key driver of child marriage in rural areas. And this also impacts on other sectors such as teenage pregnancy, and how you can raise awareness very practically at the rural level is to partner with existing civil society. So looking at community-based organizations that are present in the district that you want to engage in, particularly because they have existing girls clubs that they work in partnership with the girls, with the teachers to institute. So this could be an opportunity for you to reach out and talk about some of the challenges that COVID-19 is presenting in your given context. Another opportunity is to look at parent-teachers associations, which are then mandated by the schools to manage how the schools are interfacing with this COVID-19 pandemic and the reactions and responses to the return to school policies that the schools have to initiate. And then lastly, also to engage with service providers, because we know that the girls will reach out for services. This is an opportunity to also be part of the youth-friendly services that the government is providing to the girls to pass on the messaging around the impact of COVID-19. But I also wanted to pick up on the element around monitoring of budgets. So it's important to also monitor the budgets that are presented, both at the national and subnational level, to ensure that all the sectors have contributions that would lead to access to rights and services for girls. So for example, looking at health budgets, looking at education budgets, looking at budgets on services such as water, to check that line items are provided that would ensure access to rights for girls and adolescents. Thank you very much.
You are so much welcome to Yvette. I'm inviting more hands. I am inviting more hands. We still have few minutes before we break for lunch. If we have any hand, Hello, Ms. Zuma. Do we have any hand up?
Chairperson, I can't see any hands. So maybe we could, yes.
if we don't
Oh,
have
there's,
any hands up.
Sorry, Chairperson, there's Honorable Marie Jean Dark.
Honorable Marie?
Yes,
Okay,
Madagascar.
now let's give Honorable Marine. Honorable Marine, take the floor. Honorable Marine, take the floor.
Merci, Président. Bonjour les honorables qui sont présents. Je voudrais intervenir sur la situation générale de Madagascar concernant le mariage des enfants. Pour Madagascar, les mariages précoces restent une pratique courante, et spécialement dans les régions reculées. Selon les dernières statistiques, 41,2% des Malgaches se marient avant 18 ans. Un fort taux de mariage précoce actuellement. Le taux des femmes malgaches mariées avant l'âge de 18 ans est de 41% d'après une étude menée à Madagascar. Le taux des femmes de 20 à 24 ans qui se sont mariées avant 18 ans atteint 58% dans les régions reculées. Ces chiffres ont été recensés au cours de la campagne nationale de sensibilisation sur la lutte contre les mariages précoces qui a eu lieu dans la région de Diana, dans le nord de Madagascar. Antananarive, depuis le 26 juin 2020, les mariages des enfants est un phénomène alarmant dans le pays d'Afrique. Madagascar n'est pas épargné. La grande île s'est pourtant engagée dans la lutte contre cette pratique pour conscientiser parents, éducateurs et sociétés dans son ensemble sur le respect des droits des enfants. Laissez-nous vivre notre enfance. Ne nous mariez pas. Voici les thèmes de la campagne lancée au début de ces mois qui s'étalera sur une période de 2 ans. Les mariages avant 18 ans est une réalité pour beaucoup de jeunes filles. Dans de nombreuses régions du monde, les parents encourageront les mariages de leurs filles alors qu'ils sont encore enfants dans l'espoir que le mariage leur sera bénéfique à la fois financièrement et socialement, tout en alléguant les fardeaux financiers qui pèsent sur la famille. En réalité, les mariages des enfants est une violation de droits humains qui compromet le développement des filles et conduit souvent à une grossesse précoce et à l'isolement social, avec peu d'éducation et une formation professionnelle médiocre, renforçant les caractères sexospécifiques de la pauvreté. Le droit du consentement libre et plein à un mariage est reconnu dans les déclarations universelles des droits de l'homme, avec la reconnaissance que le consentement ne peut être libre et plein lorsque l'une des parties impliquées n'est pas suffisamment mature pour prendre une décision éclairée concernant un partenaire pour la vie. Mais je souligne un peu, je veux donner un peu aussi mon avis, pas seulement par rapport au Covid-19, mais en tant que député élu dans le sud de Madagascar, là où il y a beaucoup de la pauvreté qui est vraiment remarquable à Madagascar, je voudrais vous dire aussi et partager notre situation actuellement dans le sud de Madagascar. Parce que nous, on est victime des changements climatiques. On n'a plus d'eau, on n'a pas d'eau à boire ni pour vivre. C'est pour ça que je voulais vous partager. Donc, le peuple dans le sud, ça dégrade tout le temps leur vie, leur quotidien. Il n'y a pas de travail, il n'y a pas de source d'argent. Donc, c'est comme la famille, ils sont obligés de donner leurs enfants pour avoir un peu de source d'argent. Et c'est comme ça qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? Quelles solutions pouvons-nous énoncer pour éliminer cette situation en général, surtout en Afrique? C'est comme ça que je voulais vous partager et on va lutter ensemble. Et avec notre réunion d'aujourd'hui, je pense que on aura toujours l'occasion pour parler de cela, aux membres des pays membres de la SADC, pour qu'on puisse vraiment lutter et agir, mais pas seulement pour faire les débats, parce que c'est vraiment la réalité dans nos pays. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, honorable member from Madagascar. The presenter, can you please say something towards what honorable member have just alluded to? Our presenters.
Thank you, Chair.
Are you still with us?
Want to. Yes, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you, Doctor.
Thank you. We want to congratulate Madagascar for the campaign. Madagascar is one of the countries that have launched the campaign to end child marriage. What I find very interesting in the honorable member's presentation is that there is a lot that is happening within countries, and we need to continue to look at how to draw the lessons on the best practices, on the good things that are working from the role of parliaments within the region. I think Secretary General, when you invited me last to the work of the Oversight Committee, we're also talking about sharing experiences on.
Is Dr.
The doctor has lost her connectivity, Chair. Connectivity challenges, but if either Yvette or Anandita could comment on the intervention by the honorable member for Madagascar.
All right.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah.
If I may.
Yes, you may. You may.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the honorable member from Madagascar for sharing the experience of Madagascar. As you rightly pointed out, it is a country that has a very high level of child marriage below the age of 18 as well as below the age of 15. And we congratulate the country for taking the steps to do the national launch of the campaign. Having said that, we know that the unique geographical location of Madagascar does, as you rightly said, expose it to climate and humanitarian crises, which have multiplier impacts on girls as well. You've spoken about the shortage of water, clean water, which has huge implications on things like menstrual health management for young girls, as well as huge implications for our other work to empower young girls, as well as for the communities that they live in. For UNFPA, Madagascar is a priority country given the multiple development sort of challenges that are faced by the country, not just on child marriage, but also on things like teenage pregnancy, gender-based violence, and humanitarian crises. And our country office that's based in Antananarivo works very closely with your provincial and district governments as well to try and ensure that they reach places like the South that are particularly affected. So I would like to just share with the honorable member that there is partners on the ground who are working with you and can be reached out for further support on the important work that is being done on child marriage and related issues in the country. Thank you. Over.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome, Anandita. We have approximately 10 minutes or so. If we have another hand I can give, we will take only 5-6 minutes. And if we don't have any hand, that will conclude our first session. Do we have any hand? We don't have any hand.
There's Yvette.
In that, we have another hand. Yvette.
Yes, Chairperson.
Come,
Yvette.
come, Yvette. Take a floor.
Thank you, Chair.
Yvette, take a floor.
Thank you, Chair. And I also wanted to thank Honorable Marie for the contribution, highlighting, of course, the subnational disparities that are present in Madagascar when it comes to prevalence on child marriage. I wanted to pick up on the point you raised, very important around the campaign. And what you've introduced is how we can work as parliamentarians, as champions, using social media and other traditional media to bring awareness to the issue of child marriage. So we know when we work with the youth, they're very good on social media. They can raise awareness on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and other platforms. So this is an opportunity for parliamentarians to engage in all these different platforms to raise awareness on the importance of ending child marriage, the different drivers, as you've mentioned, climate change, lack of access to resources, including water and sanitation, that could impact girls in our communities. I also wanted to raise the fact that we do work with partners in Madagascar, including the World YWCA, that has made the situation in Madagascar public, the context that is Madagascar public to other contexts, using platforms such as the Universal Periodic Review to highlight what Madagascar is doing on ending child marriage. So these are partners that you could also engage with at the national and subnational level to highlight the campaign, to raise greater awareness, and to ensure that we have more youth involved on campaigns to end child marriage. Thank you very much.
You are most welcome, Yvette. You are most welcome, Yvette. Network did cut Doctor before she could finish whatever she was saying. Doctor, are you still here? If you are still with us, I want to give you this chance to finish. You were still giving us your deliberations, and the network caught you up. Are you still here?
Yes, I am, Chair. I wanted to just end with a recommendation that the contribution from Madagascar provides a good opportunity for us to look at how we can develop scorecards with certain key areas to a scorecard to share ourselves on how we are performing, and as part of the monitoring of the commitments that we have. But again, thank you.
Da monitorização no âmbito dos compromissos assumidos.
Are you done, Doctor?
Yes, thank you. I was hearing an echo.
Eu estava
I was getting an echo, so I was not sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm done.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much. I think now our time is up, and this concludes our first session. We shall now break for lunch and reconvene at 14 hours Johannesburg time. Enjoy your lunch, everyone.
Thank you very much again for the opportunity, and enjoy your lunch. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, UNFPA, Girls Not Bride, and our Goodwill Ambassador. Thank you for chipping in.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Honorable members and partners, welcome back to the second session of our meeting. This session is towards a comprehensive and coordinated approach in eradicating child marriage during and post-COVID-19 in the SADC region. We have therefore the presenters in this session. The second presenter in this session is UNESCO on mapping the way forward for the SADC region in dealing with the impact of COVID-19 on early and child marriage. The second presenter and last presenter in this session is Mr. Lazarus Muale, Plan International Regional Program Manager, Ending Child Marriage 18+ Center of Excellence on Ending Child Marriage in Middle East, Eastern and Southern Africa. He will present on understanding the upcoming regional assessment on the impact of COVID-19 on measures to end child marriage. And I will therefore call the first presenter for this session, please. UNESCO. UNESCO, take the floor.
Honorable Chairperson.
Yes.
Honorable Chairperson, good afternoon. Good afternoon, honorable members. Unfortunately, we will not be having a presentation by UNESCO.
Okay.
So yes, so maybe we could go straight into Plan International. This just came to me a few minutes ago.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Or in that event, we'll go straight to Mr. Lazarus Muale, Plan International Regional Program Manager. Over to you, sir.
Hello, good afternoon, honorable members, and good afternoon, colleagues from civil society. I hope you are able to get me clear. Greetings from Lusaka, Zambia. I'm Lazarus Muale, as has been already introduced, and I work with the Plan International on our Ending Child Marriage program that we call 18+. I would like to be guided if the host, Betty, may be able to project my presentation, or if I need to do it from my end.
Mr. Muale, let me see if I can share the screen. And then, yes, if I don't make it, you might have to do it on your end.
All right. So while that is going on, let me just say thank you for giving us this opportunity to interact with the committee on this very important subject, especially where our region, Southern Africa, is concerned. So my presentation is on understanding the upcoming rapid assessment on the impact of COVID-19 on the measures to end child marriage. This is obviously coming from the fact that COVID-19 came at a time when in our region we are still grappling with the issue of child marriage and teenage pregnancy. And so this kind of just compounded the situation. And my colleagues who presented earlier in the morning, I think really made a very good presentation on what this situation is all about. However, we have observed across the region that the information is still, if you like, sitting in silos in different countries, and we do not have some sort of a comprehensive regional picture that indicates to us to say what is the situation in our region and what is driving the rising teenage pregnancies that have been reported in some countries, or indeed in some communities. So I can see the screen, the presentation, and just also to mention from the onset that this rapid assessment is going to be conducted jointly by ourselves Plan and Girls Not Brides Rosario Memorial Trust, that is headed by the AU Goodwill Ambassador on Ending Child Marriage, UNICEF Regional Office, and also UNFPA Regional Office. And I'm sure you've had to hear also from these colleagues in the morning session. Next. So I was just indicating to say we are receiving reports almost on a weekly, monthly basis of the rising rate of teenage pregnancy in the region. And we've seen these screaming headlines in the papers. For instance, a week ago in Zambia, there was a story that came to say there are more than 1,800 teenage pregnancies recorded during the time of COVID in one region of our country, which is precisely the eastern region. You can proceed to the next slide, Betty. And we've also, read about reports in Kenya where teenage pregnancy is rising, and this has been linked to the COVID-19 and the impact that the lockdowns have had, and also in Malawi as well. We've been receiving all these reports. But like I said, we have this national level, anecdotal information, but it's not aggregated at the regional level for us to fully understand how the picture is in the region, insofar as the measures to implement the SADC model law are concerned, and also the measures as outlined in the AU Common Position on Ending Child Marriage are concerned. So it became imperative that we needed to know what is the state of the SADC model law during this time, how are member states working around and implementing the measures prescribed by the SADC model law during this time of COVID, not only the SADC model law, but broadening that up to the continental level and looking at the AU Common Position on Ending Child Marriage. Next slide. So the purpose of this assessment, therefore, is to generate evidence on the impact of COVID-19 on ending child marriage in Eastern and Southern Africa, insofar as the measures that we have put in place. In Southern Africa, we are working so much with the SADC model law, for instance, at a regional level. And in countries, there are all these other policies and the legal frameworks that some countries have put in place, like Mozambique, and some countries have also went ahead, like Malawi. So the result of this assessment is to inform the development and alignment of program and advocacy strategies by us, the partners, the organizations that are working together to end child marriage. And also, we hope that the assessment is going to help us outline strategies for utilization of the SADC model law during COVID-19 and also during the pandemic recovery period. And I think the third purpose of the rapid assessment is of much interest to SADC PF. So to carry out this assessment, we have come up with some assessment questions, and we are hoping that as we reflect on this presentation, honorable members may also open our eyes and perhaps suggest some of the other areas we may need to look at, because this is still pretty much at the design stage and there's still room for us to make some changes. So we'd like to know the state and implementation of the SADC model law as well as the AU Common Position on Ending Child Marriage in the target countries. So I'll talk, I think, about the target countries later on. So I'd like to know what measures are in place to curb the rising or expected spike in teenage pregnancies and child marriage during COVID-19, and to what extent are these implemented? So we'd like to probe in the countries, are there any measures to respond to this impact? And if they are there, what are they? Then we also want to know what kind of strategies can be employed to reduce the vulnerability of children to child marriage and enhance their agency, and also protection of girls already in marriage, especially during and after COVID-19 pandemic. The fourth assessment question is, how can the SADC model on ending child marriage be utilized by SADC member states in addressing the impact of COVID-19 on ending child marriage work? So we have this framework in this region. So how can it fit given the current situation, maybe where even national governments may want to focus on many other things, and precisely maybe not on this issue that we are discussing this afternoon, but we are trying to find strategies and better mechanisms that this can still be done. In terms of the study design, we want to collect both qualitative and quantitative information, and this will be done through desk review. Quite a number of countries have conducted rapid gender assessments or just some studies to understand the impact of COVID-19 on a number of social issues, on GBV, on the provision of sexual, reproductive, and health rights services and information. So there are a number of all these assessments that some countries in the region have done. So what we want is bring all this information and review for us to be able to get an understanding of the situation across the region. Other than the desk review, we would like also to collect primary data through key informants, and we will target some stakeholders, and including girls and young women, as well as boys that are affected by child marriage or at risk of child marriage in the countries within the region. We would like also to get primary data from UN agencies, for instance, because a lot of work is going on in that aspect. We would like to talk to our community leaders in the target countries to understand the situation in their communities and what they are doing about it, and also what they hope can be done about it. We would also like to speak to members, honorable members of parliament, and I think this platform this afternoon is an opportunity for us to say we would like you to be part of this assessment so that we can understand in different countries how the model law, for instance, is faring during this time. We would like to speak to government officials, civil society organizations doing work in their various countries. Then in terms of target countries, we are planning to sample a total number of 6 countries that will be drawn to ensure a balanced representation of the entire region. So since many of our organizations cover Eastern and Southern Africa, we would like to have countries in Southern Africa, in Eastern Africa, as well as some countries up north. But 6, and these will be for the primary data collection to triangulate the desk review. But for the desk review, we'll target as many countries as possible for those that have conducted some rapid assessments in their nation. So once this is done, we are hoping that the assessment is going to give us some programmatic recommendations for stakeholders who are working to end child marriage in the region, including young advocates, because as you know, the young people are the ones that are heavily affected by this problem, and they would also want the young people to be, in the forefront in creating this change that we all want to see. So programmatic recommendations for stakeholders will be key, so that informs, our project design and how we can intervene during this COVID period, and also as we recover from the pandemic. We expect that in the findings, we'll draw recommendations for the SADC Parliamentary Forum on implementation of the model law during COVID-19. And this is where the Gender Committee and the Model Law Oversight Committee come in terms of utilizing this evidence and engaging with member states. We also expect that we will have recommendations for governments in country on what kind of interventions they can put in place to address this rising problem, and specifically for national parliaments to play their oversight role on government in terms of ensuring that this issue of child marriage and rising teenage pregnancy during this time equally receives much attention that it deserves. So we are starting our assessment sometime next week through an inception workshop, where we are going to be, all of us, discussing the design and how to move forward. And we expect that we end this rapid assessment by December, because we are still dealing with an emergency. So we need to move at least quite faster. And we are hoping that by December, we can have a final report. Thereafter, we can look at how do we socialize this report with the various stakeholders, including the committee that we are interacting with this afternoon. So this is where I end my sharing in terms of our planned regional assessment, and we will be very happy to have some reflection over it in terms of how perhaps the committee can support us, SADC Parliamentary Forum can support us, and also anything else that you may feel is important for your level of understanding, in order for you to play an effective role in this. We'll be happy to receive that feedback, so that we can factor in all those suggestions in our assessment. Thank you so much, Honorable, and thank you so much, Betty.
Honorable Chairperson.
Betty.
Good afternoon, honorable members. There is
someone from UNESCO will join, huh?
Thank you very much.
Oh, I think the chair is coming back.
Someone from UNESCO will join as we take it.
Okay, ma'am.
No, Chair, I was kindly indicating that there's someone from UNESCO who will join. Even if they don't give a presentation, they can give perspective around the question that is on the chat group. Among, also including all the other resource persons who are on board, they could also tackle the question posted on the chat group. Thank you.
So now, are we at the point where we can give someone from UNESCO to say something? I hope so. Someone from UNESCO, we give you a platform. Please take the floor.
They are trying to join from UNESCO. Will indicate when they're able to, when they've joined. But for now, we can take input from members. Okay. Sincere apologies. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for such informative presentation. I shall now open the floor for debate. Honorable members, now I would like to see your hands up so that we can debate together. Let us now debate together. Do we have any hands up? Is Chipo Nkata? Honorable
Yes,
Chipo
good
Nkata.
afternoon. Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Chipon Kata. I'm a gender consultant with UNFPA in Zambia. Unfortunately, I would have to leave the meeting soon, but there was one issue that was raised by a honorable member on the link between CSC and child marriage, and I would like to respond to that before I leave it, if that is okay with you.
Please kindly elaborate on what CSE is in full. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get that. May you please repeat?
Kindly elaborate on CSE, not abbreviations for now. Thank you.
Sure. So the question is on the link between comprehensive sexuality education and ending child marriages. So in response to the question that's on the floor, I would just like to state that different countries do have different packages for comprehensive sexuality education. And in the recent past, there's been some discontent around the contents of that sexuality education curriculum that's often offered in schools. I can't speak on the details of each and every country present, but I will say that one of the key things that comprehensive sexuality education seeks to do is to sensitize children on sexuality issues, sexual activity and behavior. And it plays a significant role in reducing the risk of STIs, including HIV transmission, unintended pregnancies, abusive sexual activity and exploitation. And most of the curricula that are developed seek to achieve this purpose. And so you typically find in a comprehensive sexuality education curriculum contents on relationships, on values and attitudes, and skills, cultural, society and human rights, human sexual behavior, and things of the sort. And ordinarily, these curricula should be developed with full consensus of key stakeholders, and they should be offered mostly in schools, but there should be packages that are offered for children who are not in schools too. In terms of how it mitigates early child marriage, is that learners are given an opportunity to gain knowledge on age-appropriate sexuality information, knowledge on the right to marry a partner of the choice, and at what stage, and the impact that marriage has on people, on both sexes, male and female, the impact that it has on children. Learners also should also be able to get knowledge on the aspects of positive decision making on sexuality behavior, including the choice of partner and personal values of love, trust, and things of the sort. And so, in essence, what comprehensive sexuality education curriculums should seek to do is give age-appropriate, culturally accepted information that helps or empowers children to make informed decisions and to know the impact of sex and early sex on their lives. So that is the extent to which it contributes to mitigating early child marriages. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chipo Nkata. Can I invite more hands?
Honorable Chairperson.
We still have more hands.
Yes, there's Yes, there's Shawa, Remy Shawa has raised.
Shawa, Remy Shawa.
Hello, good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members. This is Remy Shawa from UNESCO. I work in the regional office for Southern Africa, supporting Eastern Southern Africa, and apologies for coming in late. The request, I think there was some miscommunication, but really, really nice to hear the conversations on the floor. And I just wanted to zero in on the question on the floor regarding the role of comprehensive sexuality education and child marriage or early and child marriage. And just also to add on what my colleague from UNFPA has spoken about it, I think that it's important for us to, also appreciate the fact that comprehensive sexuality education should encourage conversations within the family unit, in the home, where the child or the young person should feel free to ask the adults, the parents, or the caregivers questions that they may have around their sexual reproductive health or any challenges they might be facing, in relationships, issues around gender-based violence, if they feel that perhaps someone in their space has been inappropriate, that those children and those young people should be empowered enough to be able to raise these issues with a trusted adult, in this case, a parent or a caregiver. And I think that's important for us to highlight as one of the things that comprehensive sexuality education should and does do in the lives of the young people. In terms of child marriage, I think because we know that marriage is more than something that happens between two people. Marriage happens in the context of a family, in the context of a community. And so if the parents and the young people feel empowered enough with relevant comprehensive sexuality education, then they can be able to oppose instances of child or forced marriages at an early age, and communities as well, if they're empowered, if they're educated, if they're aware on the repercussions of early and unintended pregnancy, on the repercussions of child marriage, then they can be able to speak about these things in those community spaces. And bring to light in cases where where some children are taken advantage of in the case of child marriage. So I just wanted to say, Honorable Chair, that CSE or comprehensive sexuality education then open the doors, it opens these conversations, and it creates a platform to be able to have these conversations. And what my colleague from UNFPA mentioned is also important when it comes to outside the school. So we know, for instance, that in most countries, there is some form of comprehensive sexuality education that is being taught in the schools, and it can be called different things, whether it's family health education in Kenya, or whether it's life orientation in South Africa, or whether it's comprehensive sexuality education in Zambia and Zimbabwe. What is important as well is that for learners or for young people that don't go to school, who are actually even more vulnerable to HIV, to early and unintended pregnancy, and even to child marriage, that they need to have access to that knowledge, even in the community. So out of school, comprehensive sexuality education is also very important. So I just wanted to weigh in, and I'll stay on the call, Honorable Chair, in case there are any questions toward us. Over.
Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chair.
Yes, are we together now?
Yes, Chair, we are.
Hello. Hello.
Hello,
Are we together
Chair.
now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Ms. Zulu. Are we together now?
Yes, Chair, we are together.
There seems
Let
to be
us allow anyone who wants to. Hello?
Indeed, Chair, kindly proceed.
Hello, Ms. Zulu?
Yes, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. We have any hand up?
No, at the moment, Chair,
there
no
any
one has
hand up?
indicated. No, there's no indication.
All right. If we have no indication of a hand up, now I would like to give Mr. Lazarus to respond to what Mr. Shawa has said.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Chair, and thanks for the question to enable us reflect on CSE and the connection with child marriage. I think this is a very important issue, and especially for an audience like this one, is actually a good opportunity to reflect on this, as it impacts on different countries differently. And currently in Zambia, we are having this conversation in terms of our CSA program, and the cause or the interest in reviewing the program, and our government is providing the guidance in that. But let me just give a historical perspective to this connection of comprehensive sexuality education and child marriage. When we started our programming on ending child marriage some years back, our focus was primarily to protect children from child marriage. So children, if you like, were just a subject of protection by us, the adults, the parents, the government. If you look at the law enforcement mechanisms in that way. So children were not really given a prominent role in our programming in terms of what they can do themselves to prevent, teen pregnancies, and in most cases, consequently, child marriage. So then we started realizing that actually the young people, the children themselves, are keen in ending this, and they need to be empowered so that they can have the agency to understand abuse. They can be able to identify that this is going to lead to abuse, this is going to lead to teenage pregnancy, this is going to lead to child marriage, and they can stand their ground and resist that. And that is where the comprehensive sexuality education now comes in strongly in our work to end child marriage, in that it is giving the children the information about sexuality, which is a protection shield, if you like, against all these vices that we are talking about: GBV, sexual, violence, teenage pregnancy, and child marriage. So it becomes now very important that young people are given this kind of empowerment, not only on the information side of it, but also from the services angle, because we know that they are not all the children, even if we are going to advance the issue of abstinence in line with our cultural values, religious values, not all the young people are managing to abstain. And I don't think it will then be a good idea to just, fold our arms and let them fall in this trap, which we know at the end of the day, it has huge economic consequences for countries. So the service provision aspect of comprehensive sexuality education comes in so handy as well, so that at the end of the day, we are able to empower the young people and we're able to give them all this service, and it's a complete package. So that is how comprehensive sexuality education, in our view, it should go hand in hand with all these legal provisions that we are advancing insofar as the SADC model is concerned, for instance, and all these other community-wide engagements that different communities under their traditional leaders are engaged in. Today, we are looking at how do we demystify this issue and engage the traditional leaders, religious leaders, more open on this. I think we've done quite well collectively as stakeholders in raising awareness about child marriage, developing the community-wide ending child marriage action plans or bylaws, as they are called in different jurisdictions. But I think it's a time now we need to have these conversations around the comprehensive sexuality education, because teenage pregnancy continues to rise, numbers are there. Child marriage continues to rise, especially during this COVID pandemic. And I think we have to open this and discuss it with our open minds and honestly so. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lazarus. Do we have another hand up? Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question, wants to comment, who wants to make any input?
The Goodwill Ambassador had her hand up.
Okay, Goodwill.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and thank you so much to my brother Lazarus, Remy, and colleagues from UNESCO for the sharing and the presentation. I want to first comment on the comprehensive sexuality education and some of the work that I am involved in with Rosaria Memorial Trust and also on my mandate. We know that traditionally and culturally, sexuality education happened, and at times to even an extreme. In West Africa, we know there are what they call bush schools, and in Southern Africa, we had our traditional places or ways of living, where girls got information about menstruation, around dating, and we know that even issues around female genital cutting is mostly in East Africa and West Africa, but in the South there is pulling other than cutting, and it all happened in those spaces. Some call it Nanga in the Shona or Pachibanzi or Chinamali or Egumeni. So these spaces where girls live, nurtured, grow up, is also a place which we should not lose focus of when we are talking about sexuality education and comprehensive sexuality education for girls, because sexuality education happens in school, but also it happens within our communities. And I see that more and more we're neglected to transform the spaces where sexuality education happens within our communities in order to either to regulate and remove what is negative, but also to build on what is positive. And pre-colonial Gota or Padare, where men used to live, there were spaces for non-formal education. So I would recommend that as a committee, you also explore in terms of culture, where did non-formal education happen? And sexuality education happened, which did not just happen in schools, because these are some of the spaces where patriarchy and gender stereotype is perpetuated, where being a girl is being a good wife, and a good wife is tolerating abuse. So I think these spaces are good. They still are if their relevance, but also they need for comprehensive sexuality education, because they still exist, and there is still also the tension where when we work with schools, they say children are coming, cannot be, are being delinquent because they are not being taught at home, and at home they blame the schools. So there's this blame game that is also happening around sexuality education.
Dr. Nyaradai seems like she's been cut by the network. Oh, you're still here. Okay, doctor, if you are still on, carry on. Thank you very much, doctor. Thank you very much, Dr. Nyarazai. Hello, Miss Betty. Betty Zulu, do we have someone? Or can we give Mr. Lazarus to respond?
Can I just complete my point?
Oh, okay, the doctor is back.
If I can just complete my point. COVID-19 is a phenomenon for everybody in the world. And if we do not document our own experiences and innovations, someone is going to do it for us. So just looking at protecting Africa's own innovations, the study that Plan is doing and linking with the SADC model and the support member states, I think is very critical, so that we continue as a region and as Africa to put our best foot forward in terms of shaping the global norm. Nobody's an expert on COVID and child protection and child marriage. And so we need to really position our own knowledge, echoing the message from Lazarus around SADC PF's co-ownership of this process with us. Thank you.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome, doctor. If we don't have any other hand up,
we have two hands. Honorable Mecha would like to comment, and Honorable Marie, the Vice Chairperson as well, has her hand up.
Okay. Can we now give Vice Chair? Vice Chair. Oh.
Former Vice Chair.
Honorable Mecha, carry on. Honorable Mecha, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to tap into the experiences of the professionals that we have. I've critically looked at comprehensive sexuality education framework for Zambia. And so far, I haven't observed anything sinister in that framework. I think the complaints that are coming through actually point to the delivery mechanisms of that curriculum. Because most people are complaining that the way the delivery is being done is not culturally acceptable. I have gone around schools to find out whether indeed this is true or not. Like for my constituency, we don't have much issues. Last week I was in Chilubi. I tried to talk to a number of teachers. They seem not to have challenges with regard to delivery. So I just want to tap into the experience of our professionals there, whether indeed they have had an opportunity to attend delivery of comprehensive sexuality education in various subjects, and what their experiences in different countries is. Thank you.
Welcome, Honorable Pondemicha. Vice Chair. Honorable Vice Chair, your hand was up. Honorable Vice Chair. Ms. Zulu.
Her microphone is on mute. She's muted.
Microphone.
So far, I can't hear. Now we have Mary. Madagascar.
Ok, merci.
Madagascar is your head.
Monsieur le Président,
Okay.
honorable député, parle d'éducation sexuelle globale. Je voudrais donner mon avis par rapport à ce que le Covid-19, l'impact de Covid-19 en Madagascar. Moi, je pense que le manque d'éducation en général, le manque de distraction, sensibilisation même, sensibiliser les parents. Je pense que c'est ça qui est le fond de notre problème avec le mariage précoce ou les grossesses précoces. Quand il y a les grossesses précoces, c'est-à-dire que c'est une relation avancée, une relation avant l'âge. Je vais dire, c'est pas seulement par rapport à la COVID. On est là dans les situations de grossesse précoce, de mariage précoce. C'est déjà un autre problème depuis longtemps, surtout notre continent. C'est notre problème. Donc, à mon avis, c'est la pauvreté totale qui mène les parents ou les enfants qui vont faire quelque chose qu'ils ne peuvent pas faire. Et même, il y a des gens qui ne savent pas que tout ce qu'ils font, est-ce que c'est normal ou c'est pas normal. Ils ne savent plus comment séparer les normales ou qui n'est pas normal. Donc, je vais dire, moi, je pense qu'il faut, on doit vraiment chercher, on doit aider notre peuple qui sont vraiment plus démunis, qui n'a pas d'éducation, qu'on doit d'abord renforcer l'éducation ou les sensibilisations aux parents, parce que ça augmente et ça revient, c'est difficile pour revenir actuellement. Comme j'ai déjà dit ce matin, pas seulement avec le coronavirus, mais à cause de notre changement climatique ici dans le sud, et c'est tous les ans, c'est répété. Donc les parents, ils pensent que ils vont laisser ses enfants se marier avant l'âge pour avoir un peu d'argent parce qu'il y a un peu de petites sommes quand on se parle à l'intérieur. Donc c'est à propos de ça. Je vais dire, si on va pas trouver des solutions dès maintenant, c'est qui va trouver des solutions après? Donc on va se donner la main pour lutter les grossesses précoces, ni les relations précoces, ni c'est surtout les mariages précoces, parce que les enfants, ils sont pas, non, des enfants, c'est les enfants qui sont victimes dans tout ça, parce qu'ils savent même pas comment ils font, mais ils font quand même. Donc c'est pour ça, honorable député, c'est ma conviction. Je vous dis que c'est pas seulement par rapport à la coronavirus ni par rapport à maintenant, mais c'est depuis longtemps qu'on devait déjà parler, discuter de grossesse précoce ni mariage précoce. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madagascar. Now, I will call welcome Mr. Lazarus to comment heads after that. Mr. Lazarus, please take the floor. Comment if you have anything to say on what honorable members have just alluded to.
Thank you so much,
And then I
Honorable
will
Chair.
invite more hands up.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Chair. Unfortunately, I was not able to get Honorable Marie, who appreciate if there can be a translation to her reflection. But it maybe just to pick it up from Honorable Mecha's submission, and I'm hoping also colleagues from UNESCO can come in here. From our perspective, what we have really seen as a barriers, for us, and I'm speaking, in the context of maybe Zambia, and which could be, the same situation, with other countries, because I think in Southern Africa we share a lot of values, and at one point some of our countries were one, like Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. So there's a lot we have in common across this region. So what we have observed in our communities as we work with them, with the schools, with young people, with the communities, with the teachers, is there are cultural barriers that are affecting the delivery of comprehensive sexuality education, because matters of sexuality is something that even if we discuss culturally or traditionally, like Dr. Nyarazai put it, it will be within, a certain context, maybe girls, girls only space, they will discuss those, maybe boys will not be involved, during initiation ceremony for boys or initiation ceremony for girls, as the case may be. So it's still some kind of a hidden spaces that we use to discuss the issues of sexuality. And so this cultural, the cultural norms, our cultural values, is what even the teachers have. So you will find that some teachers may not be comfortable to deliver the whole syllabus as it has been developed. They may choose what they are comfortable to talk about, based on their own values, their own, socialization, or, religious beliefs, and so on. So that is something that is preventing, the effective rolling out of comprehensive sexuality education, or creating the misunderstanding altogether. The other issue we have seen is, the training of the teachers, that are supposed to offer this program. We are still at a place where we are building capacities of teachers to understand this, understand their own values, how they can affect the delivery of comprehensive sexuality education, and how they can, overcome that and deliver the curriculum. So the training of teachers, capacity building is key. When we started in Zambia, it was more of targeting the teachers that are already in service. But I think we need to get it to a level where we're beginning to target the students who are being trained to be teachers. And then we'll be able to make a lot of impact in terms of the delivery. Also beyond that is the issues of materials. How available are the learning materials on comprehensive sexuality education across all grades, across all the country's regions or provinces, and in every corner of the constituency, in all those remote rural schools? Are the materials readily available in the languages that the learners can easily, understand them, and the teachers can easily find them and deliver for all the grades in that case? So the inadequate availability of materials has also tended to be, a gap, and that's where the oversight role of honorable members of parliament comes in now as we debate the budget to see that the allocation to education, is including the making available of these materials, for the learners in schools. So I think from my observation and our experiences in the communities, these are some of the things that we've been able to observe. So if the program is not running with the effectiveness that it is supposed to be, it's very easy for some people to pick up some negative issues around it, and because of misinformation, they can amplify a negative approach, and that will create a problem. And maybe let me just end that the involvement of the communities in this whole program is very, very crucial, because I think what has happened is that we have reached out to empower the young people with this information so that we can sort out some of these problems we are having, like teenage pregnancy and sexual gender-based violence. So we have developed that program purely for the learners in school. And I'm sure UNESCO has also, some interventions for out of school young people. But what is crucial now is to bring the parents in the picture so that we can have this intergenerational dialogue around this whole thing. We should begin to understand the importance. So when some stakeholders lag behind, it's quite inevitable that they will come and say, no, this is advancing some Western influence, some Western culture, because they don't have a good understanding right from the beginning. So I think it's incumbent upon us to work together and bring this awareness in our communities, in our traditional leaders, religious leaders, to say this has always been there, like Dr. Nyarazaya has put it. It has always been part of our life.
Mr.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Lazarus. It seems like we're having many hands up now. Before I take many hands, it looks like UNESCO is now around with us. UNESCO, are you here? If UNESCO, you are here,
Yes.
take the floor, please.
Yes, thank you very much. This is Shawa from UNESCO again. Just picking up on the two interventions from the honorable members, and let me start with honorable member from Madagascar on the highlights of the fact that COVID-19 has just intensified some of these problems that we are seeing, problems of child marriage or early and unintended pregnancy, gender-based violence. These are problems that have always existed, and now we are seeing them being worsened as a result of COVID-19. And I think that we need to continuously make a case, especially among parents and communities, of the importance of young people staying in school, particularly adolescent girls and young women, because we know that even if parents decide that today they want to get a few dollars or few cash through child marriage, the long-term effects that child marriage would have on that family is unimaginable. And it's important that we highlight how if we keep girls in school for long, they're more likely to delay child marriage, they're more likely to get better jobs or start better businesses, be more economically empowered, and that will also feed back into their communities. So that's just one thing I wanted to say, Honorable Chair, in response to Madagascar. And then the last one is on the question of teachers and the teaching methodology for comprehensive sexuality education. I think Honorable Mecha has raised a very valid point. What we have seen is the continuous need for teachers' capacities to be strengthened, and working with different ministries of education across different countries, we are developing, training programs aimed at teachers who are then capacitated to provide comprehensive sexuality education in the classroom. And because of COVID, we have increased the amount of online teacher training across the region. We've also tried to marry this CSC education for teachers with values clarification, because it's important that they might have the technical skills on comprehensive sexuality education, but how to relay that in a culturally sensitive manner in a religious setting, for instance, could be difficult. And so the capacity building we provide as UNESCO and other UN agencies is to really equip teachers to be able to translate whatever they learn to the learner, depending on the age of that learner, because obviously the different ages have different understanding. But this is obviously work in progress. There's still more that needs to be done. The ministries of education needs to also intensify on monitoring of teaching in schools. So not just for CSC, but even other subjects. It's important that when they go to the schools to monitor and observe how teaching is done, to look at the teaching outcomes for different teachers, that we integrate comprehensive sexuality education as well, so that the quality is continuously upheld. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shawa. We have another hand, please.
Yes, Chairperson. Honorable Chair.
Yes.
There's Moses would like to make an intervention.
Thank you very much.
Moses.
Thank you,
Moses,
Chair.
chip in.
Thank you very much. After so many years of advancing the argument that comprehensive sexuality education is indeed an important subject which contributes immensely to creating awareness about what it is to be a man or a woman or a girl or a boy. Why is it that in many countries it is still not one of the subjects that are examinable? Because I've attended a couple of workshops where people complain that nobody is taking it very seriously because it is not examinable. And it is also one of the subjects which are not taught in teacher training college. So when people go out and CSE is supposed to be offered, it is left to somebody who has done general science or a female teacher. What can members of parliament do, seeing the value that comprehensive sexuality education can bring? What can they do to ensure that it becomes examinable, one of those subjects that a child in school can pass and it counts among the points that one requires to enter university or progress with education? Thank you.
Honorable Chair, may I respond?
Proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Moses, for that very important question. I think the difficulty in this question is that comprehensive sexuality education is delivered differently in different countries. So in a country like Zambia, for instance, you won't find a subject that is titled comprehensive sexuality education. Instead, it has been embedded in what they call career subjects. So for instance, if you're looking at the physiological and body image, you might find them in biology, but if you're looking at relationships and family, you'll find that component in religious education. So it's a little bit difficult then to say in such cases that how do we make CSC to be examinable. However, I think what we can push for is that, when the curriculum developers are developing the curriculum, that they include the assessment areas for CSE. So whether it's in biology or in any other subjects, that there are clear assessment areas on how we're going to assess the acquisition of knowledge among the learners. And that then gets to be translated into what is prepared for exams or, mock exams and tests and so on and so forth. So I think the question that parliamentarians need to be asking their ministers of education in the respective countries, how are you monitoring the delivery of CSE? Regardless of whether it is embedded in career subjects or it's a standalone subject. When CSE is a standalone subject, that even becomes easier for it to be monitored and to be examined. And there are arguments for both cases. Obviously, if you have a standalone subject, it means that you're missing the interlinkages of how CSE really relates to other subjects like religious education, civic education, biology, and so on and so forth. Over.
There is no sound, Chairperson. I see that your microphone is not muted, but we're unable to. Okay, now you are muted, Chair.
Mr. Rennie has answered that one. Do we have someone else who wants to make any?
Chair, there are no hands. Ms. Zulu has a network problem too. There are no hands, Chair. Chairperson, host, is the chairperson still online?
He's not. He left. He's off.
Okay, we've probably lost the chairperson due to network challenges. We may try to contact the chairperson to see what happens. Kindly give us a minute or two. In the interim, if there are any interventions from other resource persons, may they kindly make interventions while we sort out the issue of the chairperson. Otherwise, would then have to, the vice chairperson would have to step in the absence of the chairperson. Kindly give us a few minutes, and in the interim, allow for any input. Oh, okay. The chairperson is back. Thank you.
SG?
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Yes, thank you. Where are we now? Do we have someone on the floor?
We have no hands anymore, Chair. You may conclude the deliberations, and we move to the next item on the agenda.
Okay. In that scenario, this concludes our second session. We shall now invite the committee secretary to present the summary of the recommendations from our 2 sessions, which shall be part of the policy brief on the comprehension and coordinated approach in eradicating child marriage during and post COVID-19 in the SADC region. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable members. Chair, this afternoon I'm having a big challenge with my internet connectivity. It keeps on dropping, and I'm afraid that in the middle of my summary, I have drafted something, but if it pleases the chair and the committee, I can conclude on the summary of the recommendations, and then I can give them to the members so that I don't have to I don't know what's happening with the internet right now with the connectivity.
Ms. Zulu, I'm not sure if the chair is on as well, but kindly mute your microphone for now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Honorable Chair, Ms. Zulu has requested for the consideration of the committee that she submits in writing the summary in view of challenges that she's facing on connectivity. If it pleases the chair, kindly consider the request.
I think I don't have a problem with that. I fully understand the scenario in which we are, and that will be inviting me to make a closing remarks. And if we are all together in one page, please allow me to make some salutations. Honorable members, the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, resource persons, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express our profound gratitude to the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum and her good office for implementing this visual meeting of the committee. I am glad that COVID-19 has not hindered our work. I wish to commend the forum for using information and communication technology, ICT, and teleconferencing software such as Zoom as an adaptation strategy to the COVID-19 pandemic. On behalf of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Empowerment and Youth Development, I wish to sincerely thank our resource persons for their expert presentations. In no particular order, many thanks go to the United Nations Population Fund for their presentation. As a sexual and reproductive health agency, which aims to deliver a world where every pregnant is wanted, every childbirth is safe, and every young person's potential is fulfilled. Your representation lends credence to our commitment as a regional parliament that seeks to promote sexual and reproductive health and rights in the region. Our gratitude also goes to the girls, not brides.
The new world order is evading us. Honorable Chairperson is off again. The microphone is muted. I'm not sure, but maybe without delaying honorable members, we may kindly invite the Vice Chairperson to just round off and give a vote of thanks to allow for the session to conclude accordingly. In the meantime, if that is acceptable.
It looks like the signal is back. I'm sorry about that. We are struggling to get signal. SG?
Sir?
Are we together now? I was just about to finish my closing remarks.
Yes, sir. Kindly continue. We understand that you are being, challenged. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. If you allow me, honorable members, let me just finish my closing remarks. Last but not least, as one of the world's largest organizations working for children's rights and equality, Plan International has been working to eliminate child marriage and making significant strides for girls and women's rights. Your presentations on strengthening Parliament's response in eradicating child marriage during and post COVID-19 have been insightful. As parliamentarians, we recognize that eradicating child marriage will require long-term, sustainable action across many different sectors, since the causes of the practice are multifaceted. There is need for a robust legal and policy framework for preventing child marriage and supporting married girls already in marriage should be the cornerstone of Parliament's efforts to address the practice, both in acute and recovery phases. I thank you. This then brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you all for attending. There be no further business. The meeting is adjourned until next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mklompe. Thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you to our resource persons. We really appreciate.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon.
Thank you.